Welcome to episode 15 of Lost to the Nails. Heresy everywhere for noobs like me, I guess. As always, joined by Eric.
Hey, folks.
Hey, so this episode, we'll go over a little bit of news we haven't recorded in a little bit. I think the last time we recorded, I hadn't, my knee surgery hadn't taken place yet, right?
Yeah, you were headed that way.
I was heading that way. And then it took me way too long to edit the episode. So we're hoping to have a little quicker turnaround on this one. I did a little soul searching and figured some things out on that one, and just technical shit. So
but we continue on our podcast theme of so things took a turn.
Things did take a turn. They took a turn. But not bad. So yeah, knee surgery went well. The physical therapy went well, surgery went well, and I'm getting back into Hapkido, so let's see if I can tear the other one up. But we have some fun stuff to talk about today. So the scope of the episode, we are going to kind of go over some news. Then we're going to go over looking at one of my big projects this year is to get my Heresy 2.0 army up and running. And so we're going to look at rule changes. You'll kind of coach me through some things, correct me on some stuff, point out some things that I'm obviously missing, because I've been out of it for 340K editions, so I'm sure I'm missing a lot, even just skimming the rules. After that, we'll kind of go into like specific things that I'm thinking about doing for my army, and Eric can kind of make recommendations or point out little things. And then in the last segment, we'll take when we mentioned we were doing a heresy episode a while back in our Discord channel, we had some people kind of chime in with some questions, so we'll see if we can answer those, and then we'll close it out from there. Before we get going, on Discord, I did have to boot a person. I don't know, I didn't see the original post, whatever the thing was. Just know this, folks. My patience and desire to moderate Discord can be described as finger hovering over the red button. So yeah. It's short, it's swift, and I just, that's what's going on.
Yeah, Brian and I are, I think, both in the I will burn this to the fucking ground school of moderation. Yeah, I had a final warning, maybe you're an idiot 14-year-old approach, and then Brian was like, nah, we're good, gone.
Yeah, I didn't.
And yeah, we will.
Yeah,
I did see the original post, and that will get you tossed out of an airlock.
Yeah. So, yeah, and last time I put like a kind of an open invitation that was good for 30 days. I think I'm going to go back to the if you want in, go ahead and tap one of us virtually on the shoulder, and we'll let you in manually.
Yeah, the internet is why we can't have nice things.
Yes, the internet. Hey, I do have a nice thing though. Eric, I want to thank you for shaming me last episode, and you held good to your promise of every month our Discord, monthly hobby theme is going to be Where's Mortarion, and that it worked for a month, and Mortarion is finally done. My shame has been lifted. I'm almost done with Angron, so 2024 hobby wise is off to a great start. So thank you for shaming me.
I'm so glad, because I had only gotten to mandatory Mortarion March, and then I had run out of ideas.
Yeah, I didn't want that to carry into February, so that's good that we didn't have to go there.
But he looks great.
Yeah, thank you. It's so fun. And then also from the last time, I remember last time I was talking about my printer and trying to get the thing working, and I'm still having like a little, here and there I'll have like little issues, and I've learned a couple of things as far as like trusting pre-supported models or not, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, like I've been kind of ripping along, and doing my thing. And later we'll get into like what heresy stuff I'm okay with printing and what stuff I'm not okay with printing. So I'm not the guy, we've said it before, but I'm not the guy who's like, I'm going to go print an entire army. I'm going to print things that I'll need. So the kind of stuff that I've been printing, we'll get into when we go to talk about the other thing. But the help that you and Josh have both given me in kind of getting this thing set up and rolling has been really invaluable. So thank you for that.
I'm glad it's working, and it's been fun to see you just like print out bases and be like, "This is amazing,"
Yeah.
because it's great, and it adds a new element to what you can do hobby wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, so are you thinking about another one?
So I believe since the last time we had an episode, I have bought two 3D printers.
What?
They're both. I've got two new Bamboo Lab FDM printers. Because I'm in my terrain printing era. Mainly, we decided at our club we needed to do some terrain revitalization,
Yeah.
and on the historical side of things, we're planning an event in June for the uh, 80th anniversary of D-Day.
Oh,
So
wow.
uh, I've been painting a lot of random Normandy stuff. But in terms of resin printing, which is what I had talked to you about, I'm having sort of a if you give a mouse a cookie slash if you give a moose a muffin, depending on apparently where you grew up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the bucket for my wash and cure station, which is the thing you put, and it's got a little magnetic spinner that will help you wash your models off of uncured resin.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that magnetic spinner sits in isopropyl alcohol, which is a solvent, and it slowly comes apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a great design, any cubic, but that's probably because it's about 4 generations old at this point.
Sure.
And so that's leaving little bits of decaying magnet on my models, and I'm not thrilled with that.
Oh,
And
weird.
so I was like, I need to buy a new one of those.
Yeah.
Uh, and they don't
Obviously.
sell those for my model anymore. And so then I was like, okay. But also, when I start my wash and cure station, it sort of sounds the same way I sound getting up in the morning, which is to say, sort of grumbly and unhappy with that notion.
Yeah.
Um, so I was like, okay, so I need to buy a new wash and cure station. And then I was like, well, I mean, while we're at it, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of bundle deals. And like EPAX, I love my EPAX X1. It has
Mm-hmm.
served me loyally and well for many years. It's currently fine. But
Yeah.
as I look at bigger print beds, I start to get a little jealous because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I could print that landing platform all at once. That
Yeah.
sounds cool.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been thinking about slowly heading towards a replacement for mine.
Yeah.
Partially because I just like that larger print bed.
What are you looking at so far?
Um, Probably either something esoteric again in pursuit of like I want the best, or um, following my own advice
Yeah.
and getting an Elegoo Saturn because the best printer is the ones your friends already have.
Yeah.
So that I can harass Josh and be like, "Hey,
Right.
buddy."
Right.
Because I mean, I think it's a good printer. I would love to buy another EPAX because I like that they're American made. I liked how sturdy they are. I like that the X1 had an upgrade path, so that printer has actually been upgraded twice.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and like Elegoo and Anycubic don't do that. But they've fallen very far behind. And so like their 10-inch bed printer is both a little bit more expensive than I'm interested in and a little bit not as nice as I'm interested
Mm.
in. And so I'm sort of
Yeah.
like a lot of the innovations they had. So like they were very early adopters of this comes from the factory bed leveled and has 4 screws instead of just a ball joint.
Right.
Um, like that has propagated into the industry.
Yeah.
So like at this point, if you have a large bed printer, you're not fiddling with that ball joint that's going to come out of sync every single time you take something off the build plate.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of at peace with not that. So I've been eyeing Elegoo, I've been eyeing Anycubic. There's something to be said with 3D printers for having a common model because all 3D printers rely on community based support.
Right.
So
Right.
like having enough people to be like, oh yeah, that happened to me. Here's how you fix it.
Right.
Is nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The
yeah.
God, sorry, I had a thought and then I was trying to like scramble to cover my microphone because I could hear my kids downstairs making noise. They will show up in this episode, guaranteed. So I don't know that I'll have the bandwidth to edit any of that out. Yeah, I was going to say the Saturn II. So it was really interesting. Like so far it's been it, I don't know that I'm not going to go as far as to call it like the Toyota Corolla. Like it doesn't have a ton of features, but it definitely gets the job done. And I am really glad that I didn't get a smaller, like Mars sized one, because I'm just not the guy who wants to spend. I like to print a lot of stuff at once.
Yeah.
I like to live dangerously when I go into Lychee, unfortunately.
And I think one of the things there is, for me, the hardest part for resin 3D printing for me is sort of the activation energy to get going. Like,
mm,
I've got to slice it, I've got to put it in, then it'll print,
mhm.
then I've got to wash it. And that scales by print bed. Like, a print bed is a
Yeah,
unit of annoyance,
yeah,
regardless of how large it is.
true, true.
So maybe, like, instead of I'm printing for this historicals project, I'm printing telegraph poles, and I had to print 2 sets of them. I could have just
Wow.
printed 1 set of telegraph poles and been done
Right,
with a larger print bed, and that
right.
hasn't appealed to me.
Got it, got it. Yeah, I could see that for sure. The oh man, I'm telling you, the thought came back to me, and then I heard my kids brawling downstairs, and I'm just like, good God, I'm going to be distracted in this one. Um, the only a thing that I ran into recently, and I was going to ask you on this. Of course, I'm going to ask you on air because that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, I started messing around. Initially, I was using like medium supports in Lychee, and then I switched over. I was like, well, let's see if the light ones will work because we're not using stuff that's that big. And it's been fine mostly. The one thing that I consistently have issues with, and funny enough, as a Heresy World Eater player, this is like kind of why you bought a 3D printer: chain axes and phalanx blades. I'm just having a hard time, like the supports holding on to them without them kind of falling off while they're being printed, if that makes any sense. And I don't know if that's just a matter of going to medium supports on it, or just instead of having them printing sort of like with, the hilt, the bottom end of the hilt down, and then, the blade printing up to the blade, if I should be doing it sideways or something like that. Or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, where you have like those kind of thin pieces like that?
Yeah, so that's tough. One thing I also mess with in Lychee is the support density. So
Mhm.
generally speaking, when I print, I do light supports but high density, which gets you
Mm,
more supports, but each one is smaller. So that's worth
interesting.
trying. I was printing some chain axes for you at one point. I wasn't going
Yeah.
to tell you that, and then I gave up because I had a change of thought as to my approach, and then you bought a printer
Mhm.
before I got around to it. Um, there is there is an argument that weapons should probably be printed in a slightly different resin. Um,
Mm,
there's
how
a
so?
resin called 3DRS Hero.
Okay.
And then there is a new one coming out called, I think, Vulcan Tabletop. But I'm gonna talk about the 3DRS Hero first. It is a more flexible resin. And it is designed so, like, I have somewhere, again, great radio. I have some AT-18 scale wind turbines.
Okay.
And the thickness of one of the blades on that turbine is the thickness of a support. So, like,
Yeah.
if you go hard on supports, you're going to detach at least one of those blades.
Yeah.
The nice part about the Hero resin is if you heat it up in water,
Hmm.
um, the supports come off, like, by looking at them.
Right.
And so you
Right.
get a little bit of preservation, and then also weapons are one of the places your model will be asked to flex. Anyone who
Yeah.
has ever had, Drakari knows this. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so it's a little bit more flexible, and so it tends to bend instead of snap for at least a little bit.
Yeah.
The disadvantage of it is for pieces with flat geometric planes that need to be supported.
Hmm.
It's terrible.
Hmm.
So like I tried to print some of my Battlefleet Heresy stuff in this because I was like, oh hey, those little long antennas and things, those could
Yeah.
probably use some flex too. And I could never get uh, the joint piece between the hull and the prow of a cruiser size model. Those were
Yeah.
both always warped to the point that like there is no amount of filing that will fix this. Um, but one of the things I'd try first is try them like um axe head up but at an angle so that you've got a lot
Hmm.
of supports on the back of the handle which no one's going to look at.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's I think the key to choosing where to support things for miniatures is where is no one going to look. And I
Yeah.
think the
Yeah.
ideal is underneath.
Yeah.
But failing that is sort of on the back. The other thing you can do is once Lychee auto supports something, you
Hmm.
can go in and change those supports.
Yeah.
So you can
Yeah.
say, do auto supports as lights, and then go in and be like, yeah, but that one, I want that
Right.
one to be medium.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I do when I'm printing like heads or helmets or things like that, where like
Hmm.
there's that one bottom of the ball joint that needs to hold. I'm like, yeah, you get to be medium
Oh, interesting.
to
I've
hold it on.
I've only used that to pull off. So like there were like those I so for 40K World Eaters, I refused to buy normal Terminators because I'm like, they're gonna make new ones. And I want World Eater specific cult looking Terminators. So I was like, I'll find bodies to print and then I'll add normal 40K parts to it.
Mhm.
And the ones that I found, there are like some like a lot of like really delicate like dangling chains and things like that. And I went in to just take the supports off of those because I'm like, if they don't make it, that's fine. But if there's a support on it, I don't know that I can get it off. You know,
Mhm.
like it could pretty easily snap just trying to get it off of the plate and everything. But I didn't realize you could change individual one from a light support to a medium. So that I'm gonna have to play with that.
Yeah,
That
play around with
definitely
that a little
since it
bit.
works.
I've had some that I've printed where I'm like, no, this piece needs to hold, and so like I've
Hmm.
even occasionally changed it to like a heavy support and been like,
Oh, interesting.
I will go in with sprue clippers and
Yeah, yeah,
sort this out
yeah.
because I'm printing like 15 Space Marine heads and I want to
Right,
come out with 15 Space Marine heads.
right, right. Cool. Oh, and the last thing, if you have a resin printer, the thing last time I was talking about was having problems getting things to attach to the to actually attach to the build plate. It was a heater, and there was like some $70 Amazon heater. I just drilled a hole in the enclosure and put it in there, and that was the magic sauce. I mean, it keeps it at like, I think I would set it like 25 Celsius, which is
Yep.
what, like 77 degrees or 70.
It's a warm room.
Yeah, it's warmer than I would be comfortable with, but apparently it works with resin, and that's the secret thing that made it work. So yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's just, and like, well, I was going to thank you on also. I was like, oh, should I do this and up the exposure? And you're like, slow down, change one variable at a time. Don't do like, you know, like what you used to criticize Games Workshop for uh,
yeah, no
nerfing the
double
rule two
tapping.
different ways. Just change one thing, see what it does, and just be patient, and like, if that's the thing, if like 50% of the shit that I try to print at once is a complete fucking disaster, the other 50% is a lot of usable shit,
Mhm.
so it's just play around with it and do that. So yeah, no, I thank you guys, because I mean, I was trying to convince my wife that I've already gotten my money's worth out of it, and she didn't believe me. And I'm like, even if I did the math, she wouldn't fucking care. So there's no point in arguing this. But I think I'm pretty close. So
Yeah, resin bases are pricey. Um,
they are.
and yeah,
Uh,
I'm glad that worked. And that is a thing. Is like the thing to remember about resin printing is that it's just a chemical reaction.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
like yeah, if it's cold, it's gonna go slower.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be weird because as you print longer, your resin starts heating up. And so yeah, just put it at a good temperature. And you can see that in a lot of much newer printers, the current fancy generation
Yeah.
come with vat heaters that are
Right.
essentially
Right.
they pre-glued the hole for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pre-drilled the hole for you. And the purpose of that is yeah, if you stick it in my garage, it's never below freezing, but that's the
Right.
only thing you can guarantee.
Right.
Um
Right. Yeah, and it doesn't get that cold here. Like we don't have a
mhm.
lot of days where it gets, where we hit freezing, but even just normal winter stuff. And in the summer it's always cooler in my basement anyways, because
Yeah.
it's backed up against a hillside and it's just we don't get a lot of sun. Anyways. So, yeah, so all that that's all a go. When we get into like my army reboot, there's going to be some stuff that I've been printing and we'll get more talk on that. But kind of moving along in our intro thing, LVO was a little while back. We were supposed to record this 2 weeks ago, and then
Two or three at
Stormageddon
least. Yeah.
Stormageddon 1 for 2024 came in, and then just a fucking migraine last Sunday. But we're back on the third take. LVO, we had Plastic Solar Auxilia. And it's kind of a full line too, or
Yeah.
full-ish looking line. Like it's that looks really good.
Yeah. That's going to be an expensive day when that comes out.
Yes, yes. And actually, I thought it was going to be expensive for me too. I think I can resist it. I think I am
Awesome.
like that excited about World Eaters right now, just to tease later segments, that even though a Chthonian Headhunters, that black with the red is like so my jam, I just don't need that right now.
I mean, and the good
They'll
news is they're plastic models. They'll be here for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm into that. The main thing at LVO that I was excited about, and this will sound weird, was that they didn't preview any new Legions Imperialis stuff. So,
And why are you excited about that?
well, I'm excited about that because I like that it's being released at a pace where I can keep up with it. Like, I don't feel like I'm just sort of drinking from a fire hose with these things. So their production is, there are things that we've seen pictures of for months that they're just starting to put out now, so i'm I'm actually excited about that. Now selfishly, it's also because we're still kind of wrapping up all of my father-in-law's stuff and some other things and whatnot, and I had surgery and everything, so I haven't had time to play a lot or do that, but I'm just glad that it's a game where they aren't trying to just keep ramming stuff down our throats. So that's why I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's nice. For similar reasons, Li got off to a rocky start in terms of release cadence, and
Yeah.
I think we're still seeing some of that with people like, I just got my starter set. Why are you telling me to buy a new book?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so I think not having a release, letting them catch up. One of the things that sort of dealt not a death blow to Heresy in our group, but did definitely put the brakes on Heresy a bit, was
Mhm.
people had so much trouble getting
Yeah.
models. Like
Yeah.
for a while, like the Mark III tactical kit was
Yeah.
just, you couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And so that tempered people's enthusiasm. And it's a thing I've been
Yeah.
sort of warning people, both getting into Li and now Old World, is like, yeah, I know you
Mhm.
guys want to like dive into the deep end of a campaign and you've got 3,000 points of dwarves from, 1996.
Right.
But like for new people, we need to go a bit slow because you can't buy things.
Yeah.
And so yeah, getting a break to like both catch up, and I gotta paint my stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm
Yeah.
I'm not real worried about like every time we get a release, there's something new for Li. Is it?
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm
Yeah.
at peace with an LVO preview that besides the plastic solar auxilia, I was like, I'm all right. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
AOS has a really cool crow witch, neat. I'll find some
Sure.
use for that, but like,
Sure.
yeah, there's nothing that I was like, oh man, like
Yeah.
I need to put in an order to Herrick that's like, yeah, I need one of all of these right now.
Right.
Um,
Right.
And so not having those is always nice.
What was funny was I also had like the the moment that confirmed. Not that I ever have doubts, but it was like when they showed the new mandrakes that are coming out in a kill team thing. I looked at it and I'm like, those are awesome models. I don't need them. And it was a funny moment where it confirmed. I was like, I'm not doing a Drakari podcast ever again. You know, like they're fine, and you know, maybe I'll paint them someday, but it's not like, oh god, I need to get those just to
Well,
paint them
like
because I
when they
haven't.
come
I was
out when
like,
they come out in the box versus like I need them in the early kill team release so I can get this done right now. Like, no,
yeah, there
they're
was
fine.
no urgency. It was like they're nice models, and that's fine. I was like,
I
ooh,
have the same thing with the Scouts and Striking Scorpions box.
yeah,
I pre-ordered that, and then Games Workshop like froze shipping for 3 weeks or something.
right,
And I went into our local game store uh yesterday, and the guy
yeah.
was like, "I can't find your order," and I'm like, "Okay, I'll check with
Uh,
I'll check with the main guy next week." But I'm like, honestly, if y'all have lost it, I'm okay.
I like money.
Um, like, yeah, I haven't paid you my money yet, so like,
Oh well, there you go.
yeah, then maybe GW Distribution is doing me a solid.
There you go. There you go. Man, otherwise, just I mean the two Heresy previews that they've done. Um, the first one was the Siegebreaker model, and I, I have zero interest in getting one of those, but I'm glad that it exists. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. So as a devotee of you should have one of every console type, uh, I have a Siegebreaker, and I think I'm okay with my Siegebreaker. It's the old
Yeah,
special issue Terran veteran guy who
yeah,
is just a grumpy old bald man with a Solarite power gauntlet.
yeah.
I do, however, the 40K Badcast Discord, I voiced an idea, and I think it bullied me into doing it, which is I wanted to do some stuff. We have a local model show essentially, and the diorama category is always very empty. And so I'm like, you could win something if you did a diorama. And I
Right.
have sort of elaborate one in mind for my sisters, but I sort of want to buy two of those. I mean, one of them is Imperial Fist, one of them is an Iron Warrior, and then have little Legions Imperialis Space Marines fighting between them, um,
Mm,
as if they're playing 30K.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it is truly the nerd Space Marine sculpt.
Right.
Like
Right.
like this guy is just playing with his Lego set on his
Right.
wrist.
Right.
So I like the sculpt, but yeah, it is not a like, oh my god, you need to go get that.
Yeah. Well,
But
but I
like,
mean, if you're playing Imperial Fists or Iron Warriors, like it's a console that makes sense thematically,
yeah,
and
there's
nobody's going to give you
armies.
side eye for taking it. Like
Yeah,
it totally makes sense to have one.
I thought it was weird that it was painted as the son of Horus. I was like,
Right. Right.
guys, there's siege legions sitting right here.
Yeah.
One of them features heavily in one of your books.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for a World Leaders Army, why do you have someone standing in a supervisory capacity?
Yeah.
That's upper management is not what the World Leaders do.
Right. Yeah. If you're playing around with a display screen, that's a hand that could be holding a chain axe. You know, so
Exactly.
that's you're doing it wrong. You're doing
And
all of it wrong.
blood gets in the way of the capacitive screens. It's a whole thing. On the other hand,
Yeah.
Endred Har.
Yes. Um, Real talk. I have not read any of the books that he's in. I think they're all audio dramas, aren't they?
I think
Or they're
so.
yeah, I don't do the audio dramas because the second that somebody fires up a chainsword and it sounds like my chainsaw, I I I'm gone. Like I can't listen to it. But the model itself, holy shit. Just chonky giant get fucked Mark V character. I don't understand if he's supposed to be a warhound that came back after Angron had been reunited with the Legion and came back when shit had gone sideways. Why he has a giant World Eaters icon on his backpack, and I don't care. I'll be getting two. One to paint up as whoever in the fuck the guy is, and the second one to convert into some sort of a
paint
some
up
sort of into it.
as alternate timeline did get the nails, Endred
Yeah, all the nails. Um, yeah, it's just God, it's just a cool model, and like they keep teasing us with all of these like these resin, you know. So like they did the apothecary. There was a one of them that's I don't that hasn't been released yet, but the resin Mark V one
Yeah.
is they keep teasing it, and I'm like, guys, plastic, like that'd be a pretty good one to do for the
Everybody
Horus
needs an
Heresy.
apothecary.
Yeah. Yeah. And like they'd just be printing money if they made Mark V, you know?
Yeah. I I'm continually astonished that we have not seen Mark V and we have not seen Mark III breachers. Um
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I love this model. I will probably not buy him because I can't figure out a use for him, but like
Mhm.
if I do, I'm gonna buy him. And
Yes.
like if I do, it'll be like an Imperial Fist captain
Yeah.
who's deep in late siege and things are coming apart.
Yeah.
But I really like his armor. I like how damaged it is. That like, nope, this guy's taken some hits.
Yeah.
Um, Mark V is always awesome. It's
Yeah.
a good model. It's a cool model.
Yeah. Yeah, they did well. I wasn't expecting it, but I guess with the new book they're gonna have the whole, you know, Shattered Legions rules and things like that. So I wasn't planning on doing it, but there's a way to do a small Zone Mortalis thing. I might pull it. I don't know. We'll see.
The
I
great
got
lie of the great lie of heresy. It's just his own Mortalis army.
yeah, I should just stop. Um I'll paint the World Eaters one, and then I'll see if I want to go back and do the
Yeah.
others. So, um, a thing that does work well. There's no lie. I'm going to pause my microphone for a second. I have to go engage the foot of Dad and shove it in a place to cut down on editing. Hold, please. Note to self: start muting track or cut out about 32 minutes. Man, parenting and war game podcasting just not all that compatible.
Fair enough.
A thing that we do want to talk about. I want to thank Mike, the Trucking Canuck, for coming up with the best idea when Games Workshop didn't do. To my knowledge, they still haven't done one. They haven't done a hobby bingo card for the
Yeah, they're
year.
doing this armory thing or whatever in White Dwarf. That's sort of a year long. Like this month, we're painting troop choices or whatever.
Oh, that's
Um,
yeah. Ain't nobody got time for that.
yeah,
Well, Mike decided to come up with the what did he call it? The unofficial, the Lost to the Nails unofficial
unofficial hobby bingo card.
bingo card that's just apparently catchphrases, things that we talk about or mention. Just to give you guys a preview, the first one that I did was on the lower left. It was something like I can't remember. I have it marked off so I can't see it anymore. It was something like finally get Morty done
Yeah,
or some
Morty is done. Fuck y'all.
Morty is done. Fuck you all. And of course, that was the first one I clicked off for the year. There was a full Eric, which is where you go and finish something that you started over a year ago.
Yep,
Um,
love
that
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 one.
was that was my 10 tactical world leaders that I started painting. I think when the box came out, summer 2022, and just finished this week. What is it? 1% Colin Ward. That's paint 3 models. Variance Hammer, paint something statistically sound. Chaotic Brian, paint assault things. Pikeman's Lament, paint troops or things phallic. I will be painting a box definitely of I don't even know what they're called. What are they? Sky Hunter, the Heresy dick bikes. I'm definitely doing
Yeah,
some of those. Someone has to play the Germans, bad guys.
fuck
There's
it,
some
we'll
of
do it
these.
live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. Just something for your backlog. Six. What is it? Six up. Save chaos weirdos. Of
Yeah,
course, that's a very me thing. Chunky Forge World tanks are my jam. Painting a vehicle or unassembled Forge World collection. I think I have a mastodon that has to get done in all of that. This is my favorite one. Are we the bad guys? Paint the good guys. Um,
yeah.
the brilliance of this thing is all of these are like wildly open to interpretation, and it's just so much more fun than doing the rigid thing. Like last year, I remember I was like, "Oh my god, I need one more Lord of War slot," and it's like nobody cares. Just
Yeah. That was sort of the one of the things that sort of kicked this off is I got through last year having checked off no boxes on the bingo
Mhm.
card just because like it's the GW bingo card, so like Eric spent a year painting not GW stuff doesn't count. And
Right.
also like there's no room for Adeptus Titanicus,
Yeah.
they sort of they did do like you could do Age of Sigmar or 40K and I'm like I choose neither.
Right.
Um
Right.
and so what's nice about this is yeah, like the 6+ chaos weirdos was described as anything with a t-shirt. And so what I checked off
Right.
for that was I painted a box for a Cold War tank game of essentially dudes in Land
Yeah.
Rovers with missile launchers. And I was like,
Right.
they are the 6-up save, like, oh, y'all gonna die.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, that counts. I have been joking that for the Morty is done, fuck y'all category is it's paint a large or in charge model.
Mhm.
I have been sort of joking that I do have a 13 millimeter Gustavus Adolphus who's
Oh
technically
my
the king of
god.
Sweden. He's in charge. He's
Right.
not
Right.
large.
Right.
I have another plan for that box now, but yeah, it's a lot of this is really pretty free. It's there's a lot of in jokes, but there's a lot of flexibility and things like that. So
Yeah.
I've been really enjoying it. Occasionally feel called out by the full Eric, but
Hey,
I'm
you
at
know
peace
what?
with that. Got to be who you are.
Well, when we go into our we're going to kind of do like a quick thing on what we're looking at doing this year. Um the top left one is calling me out. It was evil space elves, evil from space elves, or complete a commission. And we all know the last thing I have to do. Mortarian's out of the way. I have to do that giant fantasy commission and get it done. Jan has been
Yeah,
a saint, and life just keeps every time I feel like I have the bandwidth, it just has been kicking me in the nuts. And I'm like, we're going on 2 years now, like, and it's the last commission that I'll ever do. It needs to get done. So I feel extremely seen, but I will also feel extremely satisfied when I check that one off. So that's not an issue. The one that will get done next is, and I don't remember you saying this. This sounds like a you thing. Brother, get the flamer, the heavy flamer. I have a unit of 5 heavy support world eaters with heavy flamers, and they are pretty. They'll get done
sweet.
here over the 4-day weekend. So and then I can move on to this big 10-man Mark 6 assault squad. God damn it, I love these models, and I love that they're still a troop choice, that they're a line choice. We'll get into that when we talk about all this stuff. So, um, I want to switch 6 and 7 on our list here.
Sure.
Just because this kind of goes into it. 2023 wrap up and 2024 goals. Eric, why don't you start off? Because I think yours will be fast.
Yeah. So my list on here is I hate goals. Here's why. And it's mainly that I bounce between projects. I on Plastic Press Gang, we did a thing where we came up with some goals for the year and some things we wanted to check off, and I've like changed my mind between then and now, and it's been like a month.
Right.
So for me, a lot of my goals for this year are actually painting things. 2023 was a bad year
Yeah.
for me and painting things. Basically, I realized at some point that after panic painting a bunch of stuff for Nova, which is late August, early September,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't painted anything the rest of the year,
Yeah.
and that's not great.
No.
And I like painting things. This is my hobby. So a lot of this year's goal is just to paint things, and in pursuit of the full Eric, is to get things done. So I've
Mhm.
got a lot of things that are half painted. This squad needs an oil wash, highlights, and transfers. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so do that, and then be done with them. There are like half painted models on my painting queue with like dust on them. What is
Mhm.
going on?
Yeah.
And so the goal this year is really to take things that I'm half done with and finish them. And that
Hmm.
includes some terrain. So I've got like a sort of cyberpunk board that could work for, sort of early heresy compliance actions, but I mainly designed for games like Stargrave or 5 Parsecs from Home.
Yeah.
That's like 95% done. Just
Yeah.
finish it. So you can put it in a box and say, this is the
Right.
cyberpunk terrain when we want that. So there's a lot of stuff like that. And that's really my goals, is to finish some stuff out, and really just to do things.
Hmm.
Because I stalled badly last year.
Yeah. So I had the opposite last year. I finally found I it was a weird thing. I finally figured out that I can't go chaotic Brian on everything. Sensible Brian kind of has to rule for me to get anything done because
You
there were just
cannot
so
ADD
many.
your way out of this.
I can't because I don't have the same bandwidth and I can't stay up painting like I used to.
Hmm.
And, because with young kids and all that stuff and, my father-in-law's illness and death last year, like there's just a lot. And I've never had surgery. Now I can't say that. It was a busy year, but what I found worked for me last year was it really was just about saying, I can't have 5 things on my desk. I need to have like a thing. And
Hmm.
when I do that and finish it, it kind of feeds that weird streakiness in its own way. And I just decided I'm going to pick a lane and do things. And I got a lot of World Eaters painted. I almost finished all of my World Eaters, 40K World Eaters last year. Um, and I'm just going to kind of do the same thing for this year. And so I came up initially with like quarter 1, I want to work on this, quarters 1 through 4. But really the whole big thing is I have a journal where I keep track of what I buy. And, when I paint it, I go back to whatever year it was and I cross it off and keep track of what I do. My main thing for this year is I have 2 one-to-one rules. So one of my one-to-one things is for me to buy something, a model, like rules, I can do whatever. But for me to buy a model, I need to paint something that I already own. And once I've done that, I can go buy another one. Um, my heresy is kind of a double dip on that one because I have backlog, but my backlog isn't like, I'm not going to go back and paint Mark IV Wee Marines. That's just, I'm not doing that.
Hmm.
I want everything new scale. That's fine. But like the Age of Darkness stuff, I'm like, there's 40 Mark 6 guys in there. I have 10 of them fully done and 1 character done. I'm basically what I'm trying to do is just paint a playable unit, then I can buy one and do that. So it's kind of like a double thing though, where it still has to play into the whole I'm painting one
Hmm.
unit. And so it works both ways with that one. But basically for this year, Legions Imperialis, I want to keep working on my Sons of Horus. And my goal with that is don't have backlog. So I didn't pre-order any of the models because I still have the last batch to paint, and I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure I have a playable army by the end of the year, and that shouldn't be an issue. Um, the Black Legion, I'm going to try to sprinkle it a little bit of core stuff here and there because they will get their book, or Chaos Space Marines get their book this summer. That's fine. Um, the first thing's already done. Finish Mortarion already, for fuck's sake. That got finished off. The only other thing that and that terrain commission that has to get done. The only other thing is that I want to paint something. Initially, I said that isn't chaos, but I think I'm gonna amend that to just it can be if it wants to be. I want to paint something, a new thing that is playable. So it could be like I'm going to paint my Chaos Knights and have like a playable 1,000 point list, or it could be I'm going to go back and finish the Blood Angels Battlefleet Gothic fleet that I started. Something like that. So I'm just going to pick
Hmm.
a unit of things and just get that done. So other than that, it's keep working on my World Eaters and my Heresy World Eaters and try to get them ready for playing events this summer. So I say other than that, like that's a lot of stuff, but it's all stuff that I'm actually excited about doing. And it's it just kind of plays into everything that I like that is working for me. So that's my 2024. But we'll see how far I get, or if all of a sudden I'm like, now I need I don't know, Leagues of Votan army or something. So
Hmm.
which could be the new thing. I don't know. We'll find out. So, well, to round out the intro, and man, this intro has gone a bit, but man, we haven't gotten to chat in a couple months. I'll let you kick this one off.
So the title for this one, Shad, is how are we feeling about the old world? I'll start with this one.
Sure.
Because when the old world came out, I was like, I don't need this. I don't need this in my
Yeah.
life. My Square-based days are gone.
Yeah.
RIP to the old world. Since then, two folks in the club have started playing old world. One guy has a new Tomb King's army. The
Yeah.
other one has brought out his High Elves army. And I bought the rule book because I'm technically the narrative events coordinator at my club, and so I was like, I could like run an old world campaign to help
Mm-hmm.
like support. And then I was like, I read the rule book and I was like, oh, I missed you.
Mm-hmm.
Warhammer Fantasy Battles was my sort of, well, technically Mordheim was, but like my first large game love in this.
Mm.
40K didn't really grab me initially.
Hmm.
And so the same way you were talking, we were talking about with Legions Imperialis not necessarily hitting me in the nostalgia bone.
Mm-hmm.
This squarely did. And
Mm.
I was like, oh yes, this is how my brain thinks miniatures games should work.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I am sort of interested in getting into it. I am really hesitant about their sort of whatever they're called, legends or vaults or whatever it is. They're
Yeah.
like, yeah, you can play these, but we're not going to support them.
Right.
That is a path I am not interested in going down.
Right.
Even though ironically, a bunch of those armies are the easier ones to acquire right now. Like
Yeah.
if you want to play an unsupported vampire army, the Age of Sigmar range is sitting right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just buy some, square bases from Games Workshop, Amazon, or AliExpress.
Sure.
Um, but I really don't want to do that because I'm like, I don't know where that's going to go. I'm really curious about how Old World does once it gets out of everybody's dusting off my old armies phase.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided that I might be trying Bretonians. There is a Bretonian outcasts list that's basically the guys who get exiled to the border princes. And in exchange for a little bit more flexibility and some interesting infantry troop choices, you lose all the really fancy Bretonian bits. So, like, you don't get Pegasus Knights, you don't get Grail Knights because you've been exiled. And so then the other thing that's made me really hesitant about Old World when it started was looking at these releases where it was like $60 for a new set of mounted yeomen that were in need of update the first
Yeah.
time around.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm
Right.
not doing that.
Yeah.
And so I had somewhat jokingly, when that particular unit had gotten released, linked to a Perry Miniatures, 1450 to 1500 light cavalry plastic box. And I was like, y'all, the 100 Years' War is just sitting right there. You could just do that. And then that joke sort of turned into a real thing.
Yeah.
So my Bretonian army is sourced entirely from Perry Miniatures.
Wow.
So because it's like buy 2 boxes of infantry and here's all the infantry you need.
Yeah.
Because it's just 100 Years War army. And so like I'm telling myself it'll also be useful for Lion Rampant, which is a game I want to play. But really it's just like I'm not paying the price they want for 3 Growl Knights. It's
Yeah. No.
that has exceeded my willingness because while I loved those models,
Yeah.
they are showing their age.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They're great sculpts, but similar to the Jess Goodwin Eldar sculpts, they've held up for 3 decades, and that's a big deal. But like
Yeah.
some of them needed revisiting,
Right.
and I'm not
Right.
paying for that much money
No.
for metal models.
No.
And so like the Perry brothers have a bunch of plastics, and I'm like, cool, let's try that. So we'll see where that actually goes, and if that
Mm-hmm.
actually ends up just in my pile of shame as Oh, but I've also just got some mounted sergeants for whenever I
Yeah.
break down and do that era of historicals.
Right.
But for the moment, that's what I'm trying.
Wow. Uh, how am I feeling about the old world? I'm feeling about how I did when it died. Not much.
Fair enough.
there are a
Fair
lot,
enough.
there are a lot of guys that play it here. They're all people that are some of my favorite gaming humans. Period. And they're really excited about it. And they were still playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle even when it was dead. And that's fine. It's just I I had a student that said something the other day that was really interesting. I asked them in the journal right to start the class. It's something related to the topic we're going to do, but I was like, you know what? I don't have one that works, and it's good to do every once in a while. Like, just do a check in with yourself. What are you excited about in life, and what are you not excited about in life right now? And the guy's a senior, and he was saying, oh, I'm like really stressed out about becoming an adult soon, and blah blah blah. And I was like trying to tell him, I was like, man, it seems stressful at first, but then as you go on, you start to figure out that sometimes, like, if you look at it the wrong way, you're like, oh my God, I have responsibilities. So I don't get to enjoy as much stuff in life. And it's true and not true in that you just start figuring out that you can't care about all the stuff anymore. But you start narrowing down the things that you care about, but those things that you care about, you actually care about more and get more enjoyment out of them, if that makes any sense. And so for gaming, for me, I just my happiness the last like all of my jokingly I'm saying suffering, all of my like displeasure with gaming and direct pleasure from gaming has all been about the net's too wide or I'm narrowing it down to things that I like. And there just isn't room for fantasy in there. It's just not going to happen. So I'm stoked that it's there, but yeah, tell me how those Bretonians go. That's all I got.
I will let you know. And like, and that's one of the things is like, I am Games Workshop has changed what basing sizes things are on, and I'm just going to print movement trays and be like,
Yeah.
here are my round based dudes on movement trays, so that if
Yep.
it turns out this doesn't get very far,
Yeah.
I've got models for other things.
There you
And
go.
yeah, I think I feel that way about like orc codexes.
Yeah.
It's very much like I'm happy for you, and sweet, I don't have to buy anything this month.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so like, yeah, it's a thing. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
But it's a thing where, especially since we're in such a small sort of community, that like if you want to see something happen, there's a little bit of a need to support it. And
Yeah.
so I figured I'd at least try, and then occasionally
Yeah.
have, you know, because I'm discovering, because I'm also starting up our club's crusade campaign season again.
Hmm.
I'm discovering I like running campaigns more than I like playing in them. And
Wow.
so like I'm also content with like, yeah, I have ideas for where your Tomb Kings can go. Let's just do that. Um,
Cool.
Although that new Bone Dragon is a sweet model.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Well, man, we went hard on this intro. Man,
Yeah, we're an
we
hour
gotta hang
in,
out more.
and segment one has just started. It's all good.
Wow. And my kids are back to fighting like 6 feet away through a very thin, uninsulated wall. So let's take a break here. We're going to come
Okay.
back with our first segment talking about a historical game that I am very interested in. So for our first segment of the Noobs Guide, I'm calling this Horus Heresy 1.0 to Horus Heresy 2.0. Um, glancing through the rules, it's interesting because there are a number of changes, and the changes jumped out at me more than just the basic core stuff that I'd kind of forgotten about. So the idea of like you're shooting with bolters, they're rapid fire, you don't get to charge. Um, you need to charge the thing you shoot, like basic like seventh edition stuff that like I played a lot of eighth and ninth. And there are some of those basic things that I'll have to go back and kind of review. As far as things that actually changed, um, mission scoring to me was one of the first things that jumped out as far as like line scoring units and that kind of a thing. Eric, can you kind of go into like what the basics are for most of the missions as far as scoring? Because it's a really big change.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is not everybody scores.
Mhm.
And so Brian mentioned this concept called line, which is a unit attribute. That is, if you're from, if you think back to now, seventh edition, etc., it's often your troops choices. So
Mhm.
tactical marines, assault marines, despoilers, which are tactical marines but with bolt pistols and chainswords.
Mhm.
Those types of units are line. Um,
Mhm.
and so they hold objectives. And if a unit without line tries to take that, it doesn't matter. They've got line. So
Right.
this makes those units really important when you see, even in big heresy games where like 10 dudes with bolters aren't going to matter. You still
Mhm.
see a fair number of line units because they have to hold objectives.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's a big deal. You also see this in various rights of war that make other units line. That feels like oh that's nice. That makes them incredibly powerful. So like
Yeah.
if you get a right of war that makes Terminators line, so I think that's Pride of the
Mhm.
Legion. Like
Yeah.
now your Cataphractii Terminators can hold objectives and can hold objectives against almost everything. Um,
Yeah.
if you want to get, classically, if my Imperial Fist Terminators are line, you have to kill them to take that objective. You
Yeah.
can't like try to outnumber them and things like that. So there's that's the big sort of underpinning of scoring is you actually have to have a plan for how am I going to
Mhm.
score objectives. Now
Yeah.
that's not true for every single one. The blood feud mission, which is mission number one, is sort of just kill the other guy, at
Yeah.
which point it doesn't matter. But there's lots of ones where like you're going to want line units, you're going to want durable line units. Some
Yeah.
of those units get better if they're holding objectives. So
Right.
like tactical marines get a feel no pain if they're on an
Yeah.
objective. Which, like, if you park a 20-man unit of tactical marines with an apothecary on an objective, your opponent's got to work to get that objective now. And so there's a lot of things like that have changed the way scoring works. For a lot of missions, I'm just going to kill the other guy isn't
Yeah.
necessarily the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good change too, and I like that. Even like trying to satisfy the core um, troop things, that there. I mean, there are certain things like the tactical support squads and things like that don't count as a line unit, but the things that do count as line units, I could see where some armies might get. I don't know. I wasn't there for like the initial community reaction to it, but it was kind of funny when I was first um, thinking of getting into this, like dipping my toes in like late last fall going, I think this is what I want to do in 2024, and looking at videos and with people talking about things like the tactical units being like attacks, that you have, it's sort of like a necessary evil to include in your units. And now this is just I'm playing World Eaters. So when it comes to like a lot of those units they were calling tax ones, I'm like, I like taking blocks at 20. Like I love lunatics screaming and running across the field. So I think this mission score, this part of the scoring thing is not going to be as much of a problem, except for units that I have that want to just charge anything within 12 inches. That might be a problem, but that's just, standard hashtag 12th Legion problems. So,
Yeah, I
um,
can I can see it being frustrating for someone who wants to take all the various exotic toys that sort of define what they view as the heresy is viewing this as attacks. I confess, I'm an Imperial Fist player. My tactical
yeah.
marines hit on twos. Um, tactical marines rock.
Yeah.
So I also don't view them as attacks. the core of
Yeah.
my army is 2 chunks of tactical Marines, and frankly, I don't take enough tactical Marines. So like,
Yeah.
I think at some point, like, it was some game I was playing where I realized every unit in my army was line, and I'm like, okay, we'll be fine.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think it does penalize the I have gone full on exotic troop choices, and I'm sort
Yeah.
of okay with that. Sort of in the
Yeah.
same way where Nova Open, their smaller point games uses what's called Centurion, which puts a bunch of restrictions on it, on your sort of army composition. And what you get from that is a bunch of Marines beating each other to death in the mud. And
Yeah.
for me, that's what the heresy actually is.
Yeah.
And so I'm at peace with
Mhm.
that requirement.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that again, we'll get into this when we get into what I plan to do for my 2.0 army, but my 2.0 army, like there's a lot of carryovers, and I love a horde of screaming maniacs. That it is my happy place. So, now as far as like core rule changes, which I realize is the broadest category possible that I could throw out here, overgeneralization. Um, I think before we do that, I think we really need to look at the reactions are a big one. I think instead of putting that forth, I think we should put that in. I think we should
Yeah.
discuss that now. So
In my mind, reactions are the big change.
yeah, and the reactions to me are interesting. Like reactions, reading through them. So for people that don't play, there are things you can do in your opponent's phase. So there's like two different reactions in the movement phase, two different reactions in the shooting phase, and two different reactions in the assault phase. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yep.
So
And then your
everybody,
legion gets a special reaction that's just for them.
right. And I don't know a lot about any of the I only have the trader book. In fact, it was funny, like I went to well, I'll say that. I almost bought the Loyalist book when I was in a store, because I was in a store that's in the mall, and I like to buy something from them every once in a while just because it's good to have another store around, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I'm gonna get the Loyalist one just so I can read it. And I was like, I don't need this. I'm never going to play them, and I don't need to know every Legion's reaction. I can just ask my opponent when I get there. But um how do from in your games that you've played, how do reactions to me seem like an answer to, well, we instead of having stratagems, we could do this thing where there's a little more interaction, if that makes any sense. Like I feel like it kind of scratches a similar itch. How does it, in your experience, how have these reactions changed
Sort of
gameplay?
played out.
Yeah.
So to my mind, reactions are better stratagems. Um,
Yeah.
I prefer them as a system. Um, for me, what they primarily accomplish is getting me to pay attention on my opponent's turn.
Hmm.
For a 3,000 point heresy game in sort of heresy 1.0, you'd sort of end your turn, and like while your opponent starts moving is an excellent time to go get a drink.
Hmm.
Um, that's not true. You stay engaged. And importantly, each reaction only gets to be used once.
Right.
So what you're also looking for is, what is my opportunity?
Yeah.
When is it that I get to use this? So, you do get to overwatch if a unit charges you. Can you bait that charge? So like, can you bait the overwatch and spend that on a cheap unit or a unit that's more durable? If you overwatch my Terminators, I'm not too scared. If you overwatch an Assault Marine unit, that's sad for me. For There's one where you get to shoot back, um,
Yeah.
which is incredibly powerful and means you're not just sort of helplessly getting pounded by a sniper unit and you don't get to do anything. So it does lead to better engagement.
Hmm.
There are two things that are sort of a problem with reactions.
Okay.
One is, and this is important for assault players, the way reactions work means potentially a shooting unit gets the equivalent of 3 turns of shooting before you get to charge. Because they
Right.
get to shoot in their turn. If you shoot at them, they can react to counterfire, and then when you charge, they can overwatch. That is not the funnest thing.
Yeah.
I will admit. It means things like my assault marines have never fired their bolt pistols in anger because
Right. Right.
there is no unit worth charging with assault marines that the assault marines will kill enough of with bolt pistols to
Yeah.
make return fire not hurt more. So like
Yeah.
I don't shoot them. They might as well be like they just don't load their bolt pistols.
Right. Right.
So and that's not terribly fun.
Yeah.
There are ways around it, but like that's one that I wish they'd tweak a little bit so that a unit can only use one reaction per phase. So like
Yeah.
if you want to return fire, you're not going to get to Overwatch.
Yeah.
If you want to
Yeah.
Overwatch, this is a unit that doesn't get to do something else clever to just sort of mitigate that like that sort of feel bad moment. The other one
Yeah.
is augury scanners
Yeah.
lets you use the intercept reaction for free, which is a special reaction where you get to shoot at a unit that's come on from reserves. Spamming Auspex scanners rules as written lets you
Yeah.
use that reaction multiple times for free.
Yeah.
This means if your friend, I put that in quotes if you're doing this,
Yeah.
is playing like a drop pod army,
Yeah.
you get a free punch at every single unit in their army, and that's not fun.
Oh,
So this,
oh, wow, wow,
yeah,
wow. Yeah.
because it
No, no,
just
no. I
says you
was
can
missing
use
what
the
you were saying.
stratagem. So like the answer to this
Wow.
is either club rule it as like, yeah, having an auspex lets you be eligible to use the stratagem, but you only get to use the
Yeah.
stratagem once,
Right.
or
Right.
just don't be that guy. Like
Interesting.
recognize that you are playing Horus Heresy. This is not a competitive game.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, anything that is, you know, with table your opponent with this one weird trick, just walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is sort of either one of those solutions is fine, but sort of rules is written. So if you're playing in like an event or something like that, there is this possibility that like if you have a reserves heavy army, if you have flyers and you don't have a bunch of them, you're going to have a
Right.
bad day.
Right.
Um, so there are a couple sort of bad things with reactions that I think could use an FAQ.
Yeah.
But overall, I think reactions are a lot of fun for drawing your opponent in, and then
Yeah.
also I think the special reactions give a lot of flavor and give a lot of flexibility to armies that they don't otherwise have, that gives them a little bit of that like, oh yeah, my special guys do their thing.
Hmm.
So I'll read two example ones. I'll do the Dark Angels because I happen to have it.
Sure.
And then mine because the Imperial Fist ones is amazing. So the Dark Angels advanced reaction is called the Angels of Death. This advanced reaction may be made once per battle when a charge is declared for an enemy unit targeting one of the reactive player's units. So you get charged, you do this. Before the charge is resolved, the reactive player must make a leadership test using the lowest leadership characteristic in the unit making this reaction. If the leadership test is passed, then all models in the reacting unit gain the Fearless and Fear 2 special rules until the end of the controlling player's next turn. If the leadership test has failed, then all models making this reaction instead gain the Stubborn and Fear 1 special rules. So, like, your guys are scary. Like, the Dark Angels sort of
Right.
have a reputation as are we the baddies? And so with this one, that can really change how how your models will work. If you're being charged by Night Lords, which is a perfectly legitimate army for the Dark Angels to be fighting, all of a sudden all the fear shenanigans they do go away.
Yeah.
Um and if you've got fear 2, this reduces the leadership of enemy models within 12 inches by 2. So like if they lose
Wow.
that combat, suddenly they're going to lose that hard.
Wow.
And that's a cool rule, and like changes like, do you want to charge that? If you charge this really big, really scary, Dark Angels unit, you want to come correct, sort of if you come
Yeah.
at the king, you better not miss, is sort of the vibe there, and that's really cool. The Imperial Fist one is called the Best Defense, which is this advanced reaction. Again, most of these can only be done once per battle during your opponent player's movement phase. When any enemy unit ends a move within 10 inches and within line of sight of an Imperial Fist model, you can make a reaction. The reactive player, so that's the Imperial Fist player, may declare a charge for the reacting unit against the enemy unit which triggered this reaction once that enemy unit has completed its move, as if it were the controlling player's assault phase, with a charge distance equal to d6 plus the lowest unmodified initiative characteristic of any model in the reacting unit. If the charge is
Mm.
successful, the units are locked in combat and fight in the assault phase as normal, with the charging unit benefiting from the charge bonus, Hammer of Wrath, X, etc. If the charge fails, no surge move is made. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I have used this. So there's the obvious way to apply this, which is, Brian moves a unit of World Eaters close enough that you probably won't fail your 2d6 charge. And I go, funny story, you're not the one who's charging. And
Right.
this has caught people out. Well, they've moved close to like a unit of Terminators, and I'm like, cool, my
Yeah.
Terminators charge you.
That's
And they're like, wait, what?
yeah. Yeah.
And from an
Yeah.
army that's playing a gun line, that's a
Mhm.
really unexpected response.
Right.
They're like, okay, cool, but you're close now. It's go time. The other way to do it is I've used it. I charged a unit. I used this on a unit of tactical Marines
Mhm.
because a unit of bikes came in with a bunch of meltaguns, and we're gonna destroy. My partner it was a doubles game. We're gonna destroy his tanks, and I was
Right.
like,
Right.
not if they're caught up in close combat with 10 tactical Marines, they won't.
Wow.
And so I charged them, and now they're stuck in combat. Um, and so that's a really fun reaction. It's a very unique reaction. The World Leaders one, I think, does a similar thing in shooting. So it gives you a little bit of character, a little bit of sort of that Legion specific thing. And again, you're always paying attention to your opponent's move, being like, is this the time? Is this
Right.
is this the unit that moves close enough to be the one that gets charged? Are they too fast? And I want to make sure that they do this. So I really like reactions. I vastly prefer them to stratagems.
Yeah. I have to read the World Eaters one because I'm very excited about it. But by the way, the Imperial Fist one, that's butch as
Yeah,
fuck.
yeah,
That's
no,
pretty
it's great,
goddamn good. And like
and I
you were
love
saying, like, well,
and I
being able
love
to
the
take away
narrative
their
of it.
shooting is great. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take away shooting, and I love the narrative of there's this line of Breacher Marines and a shield wall, and then it parts, and some Templar brethren come rocketing out to really turn your day bad.
Right.
It's a fun rule. I like that it plays against the like, oh, the Imperial Fists are about shooting. Um, so yeah, it's a great rule. It's fun. There's really no Legion. There's some that are a little bit like awkward or like have a little bit
Yeah.
of a nested if then statement to them.
Yeah.
But a lot of them they're always impactful, and because they're always one use per game, they always feel like a big deal. You're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
here it comes. Um, so yeah,
Well,
I love reactions.
the World Eaters one is quite rightly everybody that read it, if you've read Betrayer, they remember the scene. And it was so funny because when I read it, I heard the scene in my head. Um I watched another podcast. I cannot remember what it was. It's one of the heresy ones. The painter, what is it, Rob Metters or something like that, in the UK. He's coming here to do a Kratos, Kratos is the Greek pronunciation, correct?
I think
Kratos
so,
or
but
whatever the fuck.
I've always heard it as Kratos because everyone played God of War.
But I mean, Kratos mean like if you think of like the origin of the word, I mean, Pancration is well, anyways, whatever. It's always the made up Latin or faux Greek, whatever it is. But
Yeah,
anyways, I can't remember what podcast it's on, but it was funny because he said the same thing. Like when he called this rule, the scene that I heard in my head immediately when I read it was the one where you have like the world eaters hitting the Ultramarines shield line, right? And like they're just, and then when they get to actually when they sort of hit this line and the Ultramarines do their damage, like Karn just says our turn, right?
Yeah.
And just that, and that's when they just go ape shit and start ripping off their shields and beating them with it and the whole bit. So there's it's made in the opposing player's shooting phase when an enemy unit declares a shooting attack. Under the reactive player's control, they gain feel no pain 5 up against all wounds inflicted as part of the shooting attack that triggered the reaction. If the unit already has feel no pain, whatever, it doesn't stack, blah, blah, blah. You get to choose which one you're going to do. Once a shooting attack has been completely resolved, the reacting unit may make a charge following all the normal rules for charging, targeting the enemy unit that made the shooting attack. The enemy may not make a reaction to this charge. That it's just fun.
Yeah. No, it's just great. It's got a purity of purpose to it that I love.
Yes. Yes. And it just, and when you get done reading most of these, you're just like, as you should. Like they all just fit and they all work. And
Yeah.
I like the basic ones because even like the ones where, you know, when I first read them, I was like, oh God, this sounds terrible, you know, where it's like withdrawal, you know, like that is one that like, as you're getting a unit, you're trying to charge something, you're like, oh, this is awful. And it's like, yeah, well, I like using a lot of fast flanking units like jet bikes and speeders and things like that. So we'll just come at them from an angle from the side. So if they have to move directly away from them, you're giving them the bad choice of moving directly, you know, moving
Yeah.
towards another unit that you want to go after them with. And so I agree. Like it adds a little chess game to it that I think is like, I think you're right. I think it's a much better version of the whole stratagem thing. The units doing multiple reactions per turn, I agree, is a little bit janky, but yeah, I mean, I just want to pull off the Savage Tide once and have it go the way I want it to go. I'm here for all of that. So, now one thing before we go into unit changes, because to me that's the big thing. Like rule change wise, I don't know. This is kind of getting into the weeds, but like universal special rule changes, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to get too excited about those because my thing before, I remember being overwhelmed in 1.0 by all the universal special rules. Like, oh my God, there's so many of them and I have to read them in case I run into it. It's like, I think my number one rule is the same one it was in 1.0 is it's like, know the ones that you need to know what your stuff does. And you'll just with experience start gaining what other people's things do. I don't think that that's
Yeah.
the thing to really get all that worked up about. So,
And I think most of the rule changes that have been made are not for USRs are not like wildly
yeah,
changing. Like fleet still means you go fast. It just
yeah,
changes how you go fast because of some other mechanic that has changed.
yeah,
So yeah, I do the same thing. I remember mine and then I sort of gesture vaguely at my opponent's units and are like, is there anything I really need to know?
yeah,
And generally they're like, yeah, this unit can do thing. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So don't
yeah,
get Crusader is like, oh, okay, so don't get swept by that unit. Good to
right,
know.
right, yeah. Always a good plan. No, what I was going to say was, as far as core rule changes, you were mentioning that the assault phase is different, which is the thing. Obviously, I'm going to be very concerned about. Morale didn't look too crazy. I mean, other than just kind of having like a universal general morale looks like it matters more because of the sort of lowering of leadership values. And I don't know. I remember when it first came out, people were really worried about, you know, rotor cannons everywhere that we're going to have pinning spam. I'm not sure how much that's actually a thing. As far as morale and the combat phase, are there any two big thing? Are there any big things in there that I really need to sort of wrap my head around and go back and read?
Yeah, so I think for morale, it's not that you need to go back and read. It's not that the rules are surprising.
Mm-hmm.
It's that everyone's leadership got lower.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a tactical squad's leadership is 7.
Wow.
Which means on 2d6 you fail it half the time.
Yeah.
And so if you start adding penalties, you can get down to like leadership 5, like I mentioned with Fear 2.
Yeah.
You can get bad leadership pretty fast. Your
Yeah.
tactical sergeant brings that up to an 8, but that means there's now sort of a um there's an opportunity cost for the classic my sergeant has artificer armor and is going to tank all the
Yeah.
wounds.
Yeah.
Is if your sergeant catches a bullet in the throat and dies, your tactical squad's leadership 7.
Yeah.
And that's not great. So that's the only thing is it's not that it's changed, it's that there's some more things to test against it. So there's a reaction, for example, where you test
Mhm.
against your leadership, but then really critically, it's just that everybody's leadership is lower. These are not Marines in 40k that have a high enough leadership that leadership doesn't matter
Right.
to them.
Right.
For the close combat phase, I think the biggest one is that charging has changed subtly.
Okay.
The first thing is that tactical units have movement stats, and
Right.
those
Right.
movement stats are different. That was always an annoyance of mine that we have this stat and we do nothing with it.
Right.
So everything's a little bit faster now. So like basic tactical squads have a movement of 7.
Mhm.
Um, assault squads, like lighter squads, so like scout squads have a movement of 8. And then of course you've got like the fast boys who are moving faster than that. Outriders move 14, jet bikes move 16. So things are going fast. And then when you charge, two things happen. If you've moved faster than 7 inches, there's a table. I can't remember what the threshold is, but you add distance to your charge.
Yes.
So if your jet bikes moved a whole bunch and charge, I think they have a minimum charge distance of like 4 inches now.
Hmm.
And then like it's still to a maximum of 12, but it shifts that likelihood that you're in that range
Yeah.
way higher. And if you fail your charge, you move half the distance you rolled. It's called a surge move, which means
Yeah.
even if you
I
fail your
really
charge,
like that.
you're
Right.
headed in,
Right.
which is
I
potentially
really like that. I really
like
like that.
yeah, it's great. It's interesting because it also tactically like that does mean you potentially pulled a unit out of a line, and then if they
Mhm.
fail, like they're a little bit vulnerable. But it's great if you think about like that World Eater's reaction. So
Oh,
like
yeah.
even if
Yeah.
you failed your charge, you moved forward, your opponent shoots at you, now you get to try again.
Mhm.
And so I think most of the assault folks I know really like that because it also lets you keep advancing, you don't stall.
Mhm.
And so that's the thing is I think people are the threat range for units is different, and there's less of a just like, oh, so that was a waste of time if you fail your charge.
Yeah. So I pulled up the chart. So I thought that was interesting. If you have a movement value of 1 to 4, I hadn't even paid attention to the negative. You could have a
Yeah.
-1 to your charge. 5 through 7 is just there's no bonus or penalty. 8 to 10, you have +1. 11 to 12, you have +2. So that's like assault squads. And then 13 and up, you have +3.
Yeah, so
Um,
jet bike has a +3.
wow.
So their minimum charge distance is 5 and their maximum
Wow.
is 12, but a 9 or higher is a 12.
Good God.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And then, I mean, when we go to get into my special thing, like the Rite of War, I'm going to use the Berzerker Assault gives +2 when running, and then also +2 to all charge rolls too.
Yeah. So
So
like
holy
your
shit.
your guys are going fast. They're going to make those charges.
Yeah, and that is what I play for. So, oh man. Yeah, it's oh god. It these are the things like generally like we'll start going in now into like different unit changes and things like that. There are a lot of little changes that they made that really got rid of all the special weapon squads are plasma guns because AP2 is awesome in a game where everybody has power armor pretty much and things like that. But like these little tiny tweaks like this are little things that have me excited for the game because it's familiar enough, but that is adding like a nice little nuance, and it's also it also is encouraging all the stuff that I enjoy playing already. So
Yeah.
these are good things. So so going in, so speaking of which, there were a lot of changes to weapons that really kind of made them viable. You know, as far as like, I do like that they went the route of an autocannon that a guy is slogging around is not the same autocannon that, you know, a dreadnought is hauling around and doing their
Yeah.
thing. So there's a better profile, but adding little things like breaching to stuff, you know, where you can have increases to um, armor penetration and things like that. Now all of a sudden, you know, the autocannon that's a, you know, that has a minus, where autocannon is AP4, all of a sudden it starts being able to do things. And
Yeah. So one of the things I really like is they've given out rending and breaching. So rending is sort of a similar idea. They both give you AP2 essentially.
mhm.
Um they've given that out much more freely. So you
Yeah,
have lots of the bullet weapons, autocannons, Reaper autocannons, Curies, um, Predator cannons have rending on them.
yeah,
So that, yeah, sure, you might be fishing for sixes, but there's less of that just like, I'm always helpless against you. You will always get your armor save. It just doesn't matter.
yeah,
Where it's like,
yeah.
no, with enough shots with an autocannon, some of those are
Right,
punching through.
right.
Similarly with breaching, breaching I found they largely used to sort of turn down
Mhm.
some weapons. So as you mentioned, plasma weapons are now
Yeah,
breaching 4, which means
yeah,
they're AP2 on a 4 to wound, like a 4
yeah,
up on your roll, which means
yeah.
even if they're strength 7, so yeah, you're wounding on 2s, but the 2s and 3s I get my armor save against. So it sort
Right.
of cools down plasma. So it sort of cools down the, yeah, you're not going to get any armor saves for this. Which is
Yeah,
really sort of annoying and sort of disempowering.
yeah,
Similarly, like chartable sabers, which no one ever took,
yeah.
even though they're the coolest idea, have breaching
Right.
5 for that,
Yeah,
like, yeah, that like fencer's move where, like, it's always the stupid Gorget in Heresy that you stab the dude in the neck because he
right,
didn't see it coming.
right.
Um, Power swords have rending, so if you get stuck in with a Terminator squad with power swords, it's a bad day for you. But you're not just hitting with close combat weapons. Like
Yeah,
the power sword might get through and do something. So I really
yeah,
like the changes they made to weapons to give you a little bit more everything. It's sort of like one of the things I view Heresy as is sort of a alternate history 8th edition where we went back and like just polished the system instead of changing it
yeah, yeah,
completely.
yeah,
You
yeah,
can see a lot of things where you're like, okay, this bit isn't as fun as we want it to be. How do we
yeah,
fix that?
yeah. I could totally see
Uh,
that.
chain swords. How do we make chain swords not just close combat weapons? Oh, we can give them shred. And
Yeah,
it's like, what? Wait, what? And like re-rolling all failed wounds on like a tactical squad with chain swords is dangerous.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
The chain weapons having shred. I thought it was a misprint. I was like, oh, I could see them giving it to like chain swords, or, you know, because axes get the strength bonus. But I'm
yeah.
like, no, it's a chain
No, it's
bayonet.
it's
You could have a
everything.
chain wallet and it would have shred on it. So that's
Yeah.
I'm here for all of that.
Yeah. And so
Um,
that's been fun to see.
yeah, I was gonna say, to give an example, like World Eater specific. So they're the Rampagers, you know, where they're going with all their sort of gladiatorial weapons. Just to kind of give an example for people that haven't done it. So like meteor hammers, there was the big giant get fucked chain axe. Phalanx blades were like the two twin blades that everybody snapped, you know, so a lot, and you only got two in the set. So people would, like, before, you would just give Rampagers like a chain axe, a pair of chain axes, or whatever, not even bother with it. These are all like legit choices, and I think they're like, it's fun because adding little tiny rules to them made these all like very distinct weapons, right? So you have the meteor hammer, which is just, you're swinging around a giant spiked get fucked ball. plus 2 strength, AP 4. It's two-handed. It has reach 1, which ups your initiative, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. And breaching 5 up. So you're like, okay, a strength 6. I mean, you're wounding on 2s. It's a thing.
Yep.
It's it,
And the fives are a bad day.
the 5s are a bad day. The excoriator chain axe, which is the giant thing. Like before, it was just a big chain axe that had shred and AP3 and unwieldy, right? Now it's plus 2 strength, AP3, two-handed, shred, murderous strike 5, and unwieldy. It's that's my kind of party.
Yikes.
The phalanx blades, though, these went from why would you take them to suddenly being like if I'm doing the math, these are the ones you're going to only take kind of a thing. But I mean, Jesus Christ, murderous strike.
No, that's wild.
I need that in my life on a 5 up. And like these guys are dishing out a lot of attacks, as we'll get to later. So these are plus 1 strength 5, which is already awesome. AP 5, specialist weapon. They come in pairs, so that works.
So that doesn't matter.
Rending 4 up is crazy, and it has duelist edge 1. So when they're fighting in a challenge, which the rampagers, every single one can accept a challenge in the unit. Or any individual one can accept a challenge. So duelist edge 1, that gives it a bonus to their initiative in a duel or in a challenge. So, and then the last one is just the barb hook lash. It's strength as user, two-handed, fleshbane, so it gets the wounding on infantry on a 2 up, reach 1, so it gets the plus 1 initiative, and rending 5 up. So I use these not just because I want to read these and just drool and imagine painting more rampagers, because I might have printed some new scale Mark II bodies to go with all the rampager parts that I already had, but I'm just using it because those weapons needed a little bit of help as far as like differentiating them a little bit. Like they were all different and they all did specific things before, but they weren't really like real choices before. Like you were taking a meteor hammer because it looked fucking cool. You were taking an excoriator chain axe because it looked fucking cool. And now you're like, well, this one's going to give me an initiative bump all the time. This one gets an initiative bump in close combat. It just makes the game more interesting. And I think if you're a hobbyist first, gamer second, this just makes more of your like rule of cool stuff more viable, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think you can then specialize those guys. So like if you're fighting in a challenge against a sergeant,
right,
the guy with the two swords.
Yeah, the phalanx blades all day.
Phalanx blades all day, because he's going to kill that sergeant before the other guy gets to swing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if he's got AP2 because he's got rending 4 up. So the odds are good. Whereas if you're fighting a character, that heavy excoriator chain blade thing, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's got a better murderous strike profile than a Paragon blade.
Right. It's nuts.
So it's like nuts. That's like, oh, so you're fighting Eric's company champion. Like, sure. Anybody who's hitting at AP1, like the classic, I've got a special character with a power fist. It's like, okay, cool.
Right.
I'll meet you there.
Right.
I'll die. I'll die in the attempt, but I'm going to bury a chainsword in you, and it's big. So yeah, all of those are interesting. All of those have applications.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Absolutely.
You take a couple of the last guys you mentioned, and you don't use them in challenges, and you just use them for the better initiative to take out a couple guys before you get hit.
Yep.
Which is a huge survivability bonus, as anyone who used to play Eldar will tell you. Killing 2 or 3 Marines before they get to hit is lovely.
Yeah. And the weapon skill 5 is
a big deal. Weapon skill is a
really
huge deal in
Yeah.
In Heresy. The cliff for when you start having penalties or bonuses is really, really large. So if you've got weapon skill 5 and they've got weapon skill 4, You're
Yeah.
hitting them on 3s and they're hitting you on 5s.
Yeah. It's
And that
nuts.
is huge.
Yeah. That took me a second to actually catch on, because I was like, maybe I should look at the core things like when stuff gets wounded or not. And like, if you've been playing, 8th and ninth and a little bit of 10th, there's some of those things like the wound chart and things like that. We were like, oh, well, this gets hectic real fast in a
Yeah.
good way. So I'm all over that.
That's one of the reasons the Imperial Fists, everybody also gets special warlord traits.
Mhm.
One of the Imperial Fist ones, which I love that it's parentheses loyalist only. I have never met a traitor Imperial Fist player. But the Solar Martial Warlord trait is arguably one of the best ones in the game.
Hmm.
A Warlord with this trait and all friendly models in the unit the Warlord joins gains +1 to their weapon skill.
That's batshit
Um,
crazy.
yeah, when
Well, because
locked
then
in
you can
combat
have
with
them.
one or more enemy units with the trait or allegiance. So yeah,
Yeah.
technically, if you're fighting loyalists, it doesn't work. But like, you stick them in a unit of generic Terminators, and those Terminators are weapon skill 5 now.
Wow.
You give that to a like company champion,
Hmm.
who also gets a Paragon Blade, and they're suddenly better than like. Did you bring Eidolon, Sigismund,
Yeah.
Sevatar,
Yeah.
like Karn? Like they're good.
Yeah.
Because weapon
Yeah.
skill matters a lot.
Yeah. Damn. Well, this is just making me more excited.
It's
I'm
good.
all
It's a
over
good
it.
game.
Well, going from things that make me excited to something that just won't apply. The psychic phase is gone now.
The psychic phase is gone. It is not a distinct phase.
Yeah.
They have rolled it into stuff. So you can buff a unit in the shooting phase, or change movement, or your force weapon is just a weapon with force. I
Yeah.
confess I don't care about this much either because the Imperial Fist's not a huge fan.
Yeah.
But similarly, Perils of the Warp is also a little bit safer because if you're in a unit, you can often dump it onto the unit. Um, but yeah, basically, like Etheric Lightning is a ranged weapon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Biomancy, the classic things where you're like, I'm going to give you a buff, is instead of making a shooting attack, the Psyker selects a unit and does a thing.
Yeah.
So it takes out that there's a whole phase that some people don't get to play. Um, a lot of people, because a lot of heresy armies don't really do psychic stuff. And then it also feels less oppressive if someone's gone heavily into it. So like I have
Yeah.
played word bearers players who have
Hmm.
gone heavy into witchy poo demonology nonsense. And it doesn't feel bad. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
you're really cool dude, does the thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shoot back at you with bolters. Lots of
Right.
bolters.
Right. Right.
Um and so it's less like the Thousand Suns player where you do definitely go like, okay, I'm gonna go get a beer. Let me know how
Yeah.
many units you've left off the table when I get back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's been less oppressive, it's less risky. It's flavor now,
Yeah.
which I like.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is a huge change. The change to dreadnoughts as things with wounds. I haven't
Such a
played.
big deal.
Yeah, this. So I remember back in the day, I was like, I want to do the scene from Betrayer where they wake up the first
Mm-hmm.
proper noun. Um, he has to defend the ship with a bunch of dreadnoughts. I was like, I want to make that army. I don't give a shit that an army full of dreadnoughts would be terrible. This, that, and the other. Now all of a sudden, it's like I'm that guy if I bring this army. Probably
Yeah,
won't.
that army
I don't know.
is nicknamed the Friendmaker 5000 for a reason.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so the thing is, and this is a thing that I have thought dreadnoughts should be ever since I discovered that this is what Wraith Lords
Hmm.
are.
Yeah.
Is they're a monster in the
Yeah.
sort of old sense. They've got standard infantry profile stuff instead of vehicles, and they're nasty. So Contemptor
Yeah.
Dreadnoughts move 8, so they're
Hmm.
fast. They've got weapon skill 5, which is a big deal. Ballistic skill 5, which is a big deal. Their strength
Hmm.
7. Their toughness 7.
Yeah.
They've got 6 wounds. and a 2-up armor save.
Yeah.
And importantly, this combines for Contemptors with another trait that is a new one for the heresy that they have invented, which is brutal.
Yeah. I do like brutal.
Brutal is a good rule. So brutal is if you have, for example, brutal 3, when you successfully do a wound, it's 3 wounds.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal because a lot of things that are brutal are also very high strength. So for example, just hypothetically, because we're on the topic, the Gravis Power Fist, which is what the Contemptors get, is Strength 9, AP 2, and Brutal 3. Which means if you get caught up with a character who's got a bunch of wounds and we'll say he's Imperial Fist, a 3-up invulnerable save, he's got to make 3-up invulnerable saves or die.
And that's for each wound, right? So if they have 3 attacks and they wound 3 times, you're making 9.
Yeah, so occasionally you're like, roll like 7 dice, and if anything is lower than for normal dudes, it's a refractor field. So if any of these are lower than a 4, you're dead.
Wow.
Is really good. So yes, Contemptors are arguably too good. Everyone has relaxed about them a little bit because everybody just sort of chilled the hell out about Heresy generally. You get whenever a new game is released, you get the wave of theory crafting about how everything is awful and that we should all just spam the best unit. But in the old IBM style, no one has ever been fired for bringing a Contemptor Dreadnought to a battle.
Right.
They are nasty. The counter to a Contemptor is another Contemptor. Right. Or possibly autocannons, which is fun. I
hadn't thought of that. Autocannons really are kind of ideally suited for them, aren't they?
Autocannons wound them on 4s and rend on 6s.
Yeah.
So you can do, and you get a lot of shots. But Dreadnoughts are great. And so that list went from, oh cute, you brought Dreadnoughts, to oh shit, how many Contemptors are there? So in Centurion, which is the format, the small things that Nova uses, Contemptors are 0-1. Because 2 Contemptors showing up will potentially just be okay, cool. I concede.
Right.
But they're fun. They're cool units, and they fit how I want them to work narratively.
Yeah.
I want a bunch of breachers coming down a hallway, and there's just 2 red eyes and the sound of a reactor spooling up.
Right.
And and then everybody dies.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah. I remember seeing when the edition first released, I remember seeing things where they were there were events locally, and because the Bay Area, for people who don't know where Santa Cruz is roughly, I'm about an hour and 15-minute drive from San Francisco south of it. So about 35-40 minutes from San Jose. So the entire Bay Area, there's a huge heresy scene there. It's always been really strongly supported. And I remember seeing during the initial events and things like that, because initially I was like, maybe I'll just rebase my stuff and go, before I finally committed to new scale, not true scale. But I remember seeing a lot of restrictions on events where it's 1 Contemptor per 1,000 points, that kind of stuff. Because I think that was a thing where people were really flipping out. But I guess, I don't know. I guess people just sort of adjust their lists at some point to the point where it's not as oppressive as it used to be.
Yeah, I think it's not as oppressive. I think people have the tools to deal with it now. And importantly, I think everybody sort of also chilled out about you have 7 Contemptors. Maybe don't show up to random games with 7 Contemptors. No, for your opponent that you're playing the really cool scene where the first wakes up and leads his brethren, even though he's a little bit confused as to why he's fighting Ultramarines, to fight Ultramarines. Like, yeah, so like your Ultramarines player should bring a bunch of his stupidly oppressive special units, and you
Yeah.
should bring a bunch of yours, and like this will just be a terrible bloody game where like you should both feel bad.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Like awesome. Um
Yeah.
so yeah, but Contemptors got a huge glow up, and they're great.
Yeah.
Like they could
No,
be
and that's,
nerfed and they'd still be great.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and they're just, God, they're just cool as shit. And with the new plastic kit too, like it's,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot to love. One thing that was interesting before we go into vehicles, because vehicles, they don't feel really different, but they feel significantly different. Like there's all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's why they have heavy bolters sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Speeders being changed to cavalry was a weird change, but I'm here for it. If that makes any sense. Like I always wanted a javelin really bad, but they just don't. Even speeders, like I loved the resin speeders and all that sort of stuff because I love the old throwback, designs
Mm-hmm.
and those things. But it's like Armor 10 with a couple of hull points before was I'm not I'm not clicking anything on Forge World for something that a bolter can a couple of a few bolters can glance off the table. Them going to wounds, have they, in your experience and what you watched, did it make them a little more viable, or what's your take on those?
Yeah, so I don't have any speeders, but have played against two or three opponents that brought pretty heavy speeder lists. They're good
Hmm.
because you've got
Okay.
that same problem. They're durable enough that infantry weapons aren't a huge threat,
Yeah.
and they're not vehicles. So like I in one list, because I needed the points for it, had a rapier battery with the laser destroyers.
Hmm.
If they're vehicles, the moment that thing looks at them, they're dead.
Yeah.
Whereas a laser destroyer can only take one wound off something.
Right. Right.
So like, yep, I did the wound.
Because the speeders are
Cool.
toughness 5, is that right?
Yeah, they're toughness
Yeah.
five. So like
Yeah.
bolters are fishing for fives and sixes.
Yeah.
Like again, autocannon's great.
Yeah.
But I think it's made them much more viable. It's made them much less dedicated anti-tank just has to look at them and they
Hmm.
disappear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're also cheap enough that if you dedicate enough anti-tank to do that,
Hmm.
what didn't you shoot at?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, yeah, sure, a full rapier battery of 3 laser destroyers is probably going to at least do grievous harm to a speeder. But like
Right.
that should have been shooting at a Spartan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that, and excuse me. They have done, I think, a really good job with speeders being in that sort of middle category.
Yeah.
That they're fun, they're cool. Again, they don't feel oppressive. Like, yeah, you shoot at them with high enough strength weapons and they die.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it was a good move because super light tanks aren't great.
Right. Right. And man, I have wanted a javelin so bad for so long. I've always loved it. It to me, I mean, growing up in California, the thing that it always makes me think of, and this will sound really weird, they, because it's flying, they just have this like giant lowrider boat. Like they look like a slammed Impala to me, flying in the air with giant guns on them. I don't know what it is. Like they just, I've always wanted a javelin, and that I am not going to pay that kind of price for the resin though. Like, please make that in plastic.
Yeah,
I think it's a kit that would look awesome in plastic, and I would I would be all over it. Um, One kit they did make in plastic, and that I am going to buy more of. I currently have 6 that are painted, and even though they're the Wee Marine scale, I don't think they would look too goofy because they're on a giant bike. Um, Dick bikes or Sky Hunters or whatever the hell they're actually called, the Javelin jet bikes. Um, I remember when the list came out, I looked at it, I was like, why are these so cheap? This is awesome. I should take these all day long. And there's a plastic kit. And then it took me literally a year until I went back and looked, and I'm like, toughness 4 changes those guys a lot. That is, toughness 4 is a substantial change to
Yeah.
those bikes. I mean, now all of a sudden you're not catching a crack missile like a football, you're removing a bike, which
Yep.
is huge. So they still look like, for what I want to use them for. I mean, I like using them for, flanking anti-tank, or that sort of stuff, is creating little trying to hit keeping vehicles honest, while I'm waiting for infantry to just charge forward with the melt-a-bomb sergeant, because I'm that stupid, and it keeps working. So I don't.
So
Math will get
math will catch
up
up
with
with
me
you someday,
eventually.
but it
And
hasn't yet.
until then, fucking let's go. Yeah, and the other one, like this is something that'll change my army. Is I love destroyer tanks. I love anything with, just take a chassis and put a giant gun in the face of it, and
Yeah.
just I I love it. So like when Vindicators, whenever that model was released by Forge World, however many years ago, I remember the day that went on pre-order, I was like, I'll take two, and I immediately painted them, and I love using them. I used to feel like an a-hole. Like, what would offset it was, I used to have armies where I wouldn't use very much in the way of vehicles. So their anti-tank, if you just brought a normal amount of anti-tank, you could handle my vehicles, no problem. I just leaned into infantry really hard. So I didn't feel as bad about bringing two, you know, two, Vindicators with a giant, with a 5-inch pie plate. Well, those getting moved down to 3 inches. I mean, pie's on a smaller plate now. That's a really substantial change to those. And the same with the Typhon. So the Typhon went from the giant, 7-inch template, which was ridiculous, with the Dreadhammer cannon, to now it's on a 5-inch, which is really, I mean, looking at those, it was funny. I consulted with one of the guys that plays locally a lot. And I was like, so I think I went from feeling like I was being that guy and had to offset it by having a softer list as far as other armor targets for them to shoot at, to, I think, are people going to feel sorry for me for bringing those, or are they still a little scary, but probably not? What's your experience on those?
So I think there's slightly less. Again, sort of removing the feel bad moment. It always sucked to
Yeah.
just be under a 5-inch blast and
Yeah.
just pick up your whole squad
Yeah.
and go like, okay, cool. I think the key to those is they're still scary. So strength 12 is frightening,
Right.
as a thing. But the other thing that I think is to remember their other rules.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got Sunder, Rending 6, and Brutal 3.
Yeah.
So sure, they're AP 3,
Mm-hmm.
but that's, you need to make three up
Yeah.
saves,
Yeah.
which is a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Or or I meant 2 up, because if you got 3 ups, they're gone. So like that's nasty. Sunder, I'm trying to remember what Sunder does.
It's rerolling
Can't remember.
armor penetration.
Yeah, it's rerolling armor penetration. So like,
Yeah.
you've got flexibility that like a demolisher cannon isn't not a thing against vehicles.
Right.
And so I think it's much more like, yeah, you got hit by a really nasty hit rather than like, this is an artillery piece.
Mm-hmm.
Which does admittedly give them Morbius Bombard, definitely becomes a plague crawler unit. It gives it another niche. So like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's part of it, is they had to let that vehicle do something the Demolisher didn't.
Yeah.
In order for those two tanks to make sense together. I think if you're relying on Demolishers to just remove units, that's
Mm-hmm.
now not going to work.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think if you hurl them into a scary unit,
Yeah.
I think they're now very nasty.
Holy crap. Sorry, I was just looking at the Dreadhammer. I missed the Brutal 4 on
Yeah,
top of Rending 4
and
up.
Rending 4 up.
Yeah, that's...
So like, okay, I wound you on 2s, 4s or higher are AP2, and roll 4 saves for every wound you took.
Mm-hmm.
Like, good luck, have fun. So I think, importantly, not as good for removing like 20-man units of tactical marines.
Mm-hmm.
Great for the little 5-man and a character units.
Yeah.
Like a demolisher will ruin that day. And I think
Yeah.
importantly, can switch over and go after, like, or ironically, a demolisher cannon is probably pretty good against a javelin. Um,
Right. Right. Right.
Things
Oh
like
yeah, that's
that.
crazy.
So
Right.
there's some things where I think it has utility. I think it's just less like all infantry die beneath my gaze,
Right.
type
Right.
thing. But yeah, I think they're just fine. I think people underestimate just how good brutal is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think they still have a place. I don't think people will feel sorry for you. But yeah, it's less like, oh, cool. Like there was always the armored fist list that people took that was like, here's my 4 demolishers, and it's like, oh great,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
brought infantry. Oops. Um. So yeah, I think they're still good. Um. But I don't think again that they're like, oh my god, why are we doing this? But like the Typhon, like again the Dreadhammer siege cannon, like if that shoots at you, that's a bad day.
Yeah.
So like I think
As
it
it
still
should
has
be.
its I think it still has its place. It's not just like everyone's first super heavy should be a Typhon.
Yeah. Yeah. It just happened to be mine because I was like, wait, so you're telling me it's Spartan, but it doesn't carry guys and it just has a giant cannon in the nose? Like, I would
Yeah.
go ahead and do that. So,
Yeah, you do that. I have a weakness for fixed gun tank destroyers for the same reason.
yeah.
So I bought a Falcon and was like, hell yeah. Like it's
Yeah.
just got a big laser. Neat.
Uh, yeah.
So yeah, like I think the vibes are still there for what you're looking for.
Yep. Now, the last thing is when you're talking about subtle changes to vehicles, um, defensive weapons all of a sudden are kind of an interesting idea a little bit. So,
Yeah.
what do I need to know with that?
So defensive weapons, basically, and I'm going to paraphrase this and probably get it wrong. Basically, for defensive weapons, you can split fire um
Hmm.
between your big guns and your defensive weapons,
Okay.
which is handy for, so I'm firing my demolisher cannon at something real, or
Yeah.
my super cannon at something real, but then also there's these pesky guys headed towards me.
Right.
um there's a new console type. I don't remember what it does, but it does a bunch of stuff with defensive weapons. Basically, it's a reason why those cruel sponson heavy bolters have a purpose,
Yeah.
and you don't just begrudge having spent the points on them.
Right.
So that's nice. It makes vehicles a little bit less helpless. Um, Vehicles got a glow down
Hmm.
because of how good contemptors are.
Yeah.
That like the things that are inferior because they have armor values is now a smaller list.
Yeah.
um but other things that changed for vehicles that are getting aware of is they've got better mobility.
Hmm.
A lot of different vehicles have different movement values to them. Sicarans, which were always supposed to be fast, now are fast.
Hmm.
um, Things like that. And then also they have tweaked a lot of the carrying capacities
Yeah. I
for
saw that.
vehicles so
Yeah.
that you can carry slightly more people.
Yeah.
So like a Storm Eagle can carry 22 is their transport capacity. So
Yeah.
that's like a big unit and a character,
Yeah.
which was always the sort of vexing thing with transports is you'd be like, okay, I can't put good units in a
Yeah.
transport.
I have 10
So like
Terminators and no characters.
so like right now a Rhino has a transport capacity of 12.
Yeah.
So if you want a full squad, an apothecary, and a character, you
Yep.
can do that.
Yeah.
And that's a really big deal. Because it
Yeah.
means everybody who's in a bus doesn't conspicuously not have a character who's not a Spartan.
Hmm. It just seems like there's more of a reason to take more things.
Yeah.
as to where before it was like there was a very short list of things that were efficient and you took them because they killed stuff and did stuff for you. And then there was stuff that you were like, you would get the nod,
Yeah.
like,
These are my
oh,
affectation units.
yeah, you took that. That's cute. That's good. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good on you for being a good person.
Yeah.
But and now it's like it's not just making them. It's not just about making them viable. It's also about it adds variety and it adds different things you can do with it. And with all their with them re-releasing everything in plastic with almost all the options available too. That's a really big deal. And
Yes.
and as a modeler and painter first and gamer second, especially when it comes to historicals like this is my jam. This is my jam. So let's take a break here. We'll go into our last segment where um we're gonna just sort of I'm gonna run my plans by Eric and see if I get our cameras are turned off because of bandwidth issues and storms and things like that here. I'll see if I can hear in his voice the yeah, follow your bliss, or yeah, that's what you should do. I'm going to see if I can hear the difference between those two. So let's take a break here. We'll talk about my 2.0 World Eaters after this. And for our final segment, I promise this one will probably be short, man. We were like unapologetically long in the previous two, so it's kind of clear, Eric. We just need to hang out more.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah. It turns out
So
this episode is also I haven't talked to my friend in a couple months.
yeah, there's some of that. There's some of that, and also it's just, I mean, this is what I'm currently excited about, which is kind of what I always want a podcast to be. It's like, what am I stoked on right now? So this is basically just talking about going from. There are some things I'll be able to use for my 1.0 army. There's a lot of stuff that I can't use. So the Wii ones, there was a lot of Forge World stuff that I painted as far as, and this is back when, like, to give people an idea, some people were like, "Oh, I loved your army. You should rebase it." They're on 25 millimeters because that's what was standard at the time, And when they switched to 32s, like this is how long ago I painted most of it. When they switched to 32s, after that, I had finished almost everything. So I have barely anything on 32s. I have very few characters on 40s. And so my main thing though is initially I didn't like the Mark 6s when they came out. Like I didn't have a problem with the models. I was just like, now we're all doing Mark 6. Like these really should have been Mark 5. Like it doesn't feel very historical to me, but they grew on me after having them. Right. So like you get 40 in the Age of Darkness box and it's like initially I was like, I'll paint them. They can be the new recruits and they're a little bigger because they're all vat born and whatever. And I'll use my old stuff and rebase them. And then the more that I went back and looked, I was like, I have units with like bolters and chain axes. And that's like the chain axe is a 5-point upgrade to a 10-point model. I was like, I don't know that I want to go back and fix all of that. And the scale difference actually does bother me. So I'm sticking with new scale for everything, if that makes sense. I mean, they're upgrading so many things and there's so many new plastics that if I feel inspired, I'll go back and like rebase some of those models and maybe get them on hero rocks, so they can not look as ridiculous, but I'm they're gone. And vehicles are the same scale, so they can stay here. Old painted vehicles that I can keep. I mean, I mentioned the 2 Vindicators. I had one Venator Sakaran that's painted. The Typhon that's painted, a Land Raider, and not much else. I never really went. I had like 1 Rhino painted and 2 that are almost done. I never really went heavy on vehicles at all. I always tended to lean into like infantry and dreadnoughts before. And so the vehicles that I have, I feel like are good to go. I am trying to go with more of a theme of doing like later heresy with these guys. So I want them white with the red on, especially like the newer recruit type of stuff. I might have, some veterans running around with the white and blue, but I want these guys like fairly well on their way. And I feel like the new models having a different look and mixing in some like Mark II and stuff like that, that I'll be able to kind of get that look and feel. And I don't know. I mean, that to me, that feels like a World Eaters army. Am I right? I mean,
Yeah, that seems perfectly fine to me. Those vehicles are all good and they're all viable.
yeah,
And I think the World Eaters get really cool in late Heresy
yeah,
because they're broken. They're just wrong. Um, and so I think there's a lot of room there. And yeah, I think the small Marines I have a Mark V assault Marine squad, and that's what it is. But like for the
yeah,
most part, are like guys standing on rapier platforms or things, not rapier
hmm,
platforms, but the whatever those are.
yeah,
Things like that where like you don't notice the scale as much.
yeah,
I do have one squad of Mark IV uh tactical Marines that are noticeably shorter than
yeah,
my other two guys,
yeah,
and it does sort of irk me. So I've got a lot of spare old Mark III kits and Mark IV stuff that I need to look
hmm,
at least 3D printing legs to make them a little taller.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I think for small Marines, it's okay to let them ride off into the sunset.
yeah. And to me, that's a thing that's interesting. That I mean, as a guy who's kind of late to the 3D printing game, um, when I started looking at stuff that was available, I said right from the beginning, I was like, look, I'm not going to use. I think we talked about this a couple years ago when we did our 3D printing episode, where it's like when you were saying what a 3D printer's for. It's not like I'm going to print an entire army and do that. Um, if they sell it where I play, I am definitely buying in plastic. You know what I'm saying? Like anything that you can buy in plastic, I'm going to go for and do. What I plan on printing are the things that I can't get, right? So if I want to do Rampagers, I have the parts from them. The the Mark II, like they are some of the oldest sculpts. The bodies look kind of ridiculous scale wise.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem going and printing new scale Mark II bodies and using existing Forge World and other stuff that I have. So like I have a lot of Mark IVs on sprue. I don't feel like I have to throw those away if I can like print legs that make them a little bit taller without going. I think you said you had one where the legs were so noticeably different that they look like mom jeans.
yeah. I whatever file I downloaded when I printed it at 100%. The
Yeah.
legs were a good 2/3 of the full model, and I was like, oh no, 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 this can't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we'll make them a little bit shorter, and in exchange, not giving Mom Jean vibes.
Yeah, and I think there is a danger a little bit in. I see where if somebody had a printer and they were getting into Horse Heresy now, there are a lot of files for it. I don't. There probably are a lot of files for 40K too, but I think it's probably more prevalent. I'm guessing it would be a little more prevalent as far as having like, because there are a lot of like bad files that I've seen for 40K stuff where it's
Mm-hmm.
like a very obviously printed um defiler or whatever the thing is, and that kind of stuff. I'm like, there's a model that you can get, it's there. They sell it at the store that you're playing in right now. Like, don't be that guy. But what I what where I think that it probably is a little more prevalent is that this is a game that is skewed towards older players, right? Older
Yeah,
players tend to have a little more discretionary income where they could afford things like a printer. And then the third factor that I think kind of leads to there being so much stuff is that they've had supply issues, and you're like, do I want to wait to make this, you know, red-handed, destroyer, rampager unit, or ravager unit? Do I want to wait until the underslug missile launchers come back into stock, or do I want to just print those right now?
yeah.
So
And
that's
it's
the kind of.
unclear if out of stock means out of stock, if out of stock means out of stock for a year and a half, or
Yeah,
if out of stock actually means discontinued.
yeah, yeah,
Is a whole thing. And so
yeah,
I think but all of those are factors. I think Colin was talking about the old world when he said that the Venn diagram between people interested in old world and people who own 3D printers is just a circle. Um, and I think that's true.
That
For
is
Heresy
100%
2,
true.
there's
Yeah.
if you don't have one, you know someone in your group that has one. I think
Yes.
there's a lot of
Yes.
interest in having 3D printed bits to make units look cooler. So like my Seekers have
Yeah.
3D printed heads and bolters because
Mhm.
I wanted them to look different.
Yeah.
And so they do. And so I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of that, and I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
This isn't
Yeah.
an army I'm going to play at Warhammer World,
Yeah.
so okay. And yeah, the weapons, shoulder pads, things like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things where like the solution to this is there's a 3D printed part for it. But yeah,
Yeah.
like if there's just a tank I can buy in a store, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do
That's
that.
ridiculous.
I'm
Yeah.
not 3D printing rhinos.
Right. Right. So like, yeah, I mean, like as far as like the Rampager unit that I was talking about, that's the World Eaters, special infantry unit. These are the ones that are all gladiatored out with all the funky weapons we were talking about in the last segment. Those I don't mind printing the legs because I still have a bunch. The torsos still work from the
Yeah,
existing models. Now the bare arm is ridiculously scaled, needs to be changed out. But like the backpack and the heads and the shoulder pads and everything like that, all those things still work on it. So I don't want to go with anything that's like 100% 3D printed because I don't want to be that guy. And I'm not printing like I'm printing stuff to like give my guys multiple pieces of flair and also to just make things like the correct scale for Mark II to where they don't look ridiculous.
yeah,
So that's the kind of stuff that I'm going to do with it. But so basically I'm looking at starting with the initial box itself because again I have to paint something from my backlog before I buy anything. And the things that I'm looking to buy are I still want more dick bikes, the Vindicator laser destroyer thing, like there's the Kratos. I think it really is supposed to be Kratos if we're talking about like the Greek um, word. I think it means like power or something like that. That's a tank that I want. I don't care if it's even viable that I'm going to use, but I feel like I have to go back and like clear things out of the backlog. And so basically I really want to just I'm going to lean right back into the whole Berzerker Assault thing. Just because the Rite of War, and this is great radio. I had the page open and now I have to flip. There we go. I'm glad there's no video. Um, just just to go off of it. I mean, and this is the whole thing where there was like some of the reactions that I was looking at where I was like, oh no, if they do um the hold firm thing, when I go to charge or whatever it is, like it counts as a disordered charge. Well, their legion trait to begin with before you even get into rites of war is perfect for it because they get +1 attack in addition to any other bonus, even if the charge is considered a disordered one, right? So I want to just lean into tons of bodies screaming across the field, and I'm okay with that. So the Mark 6 things, I'm okay with doing bolters on it. I have a bunch of old close combat arms from Chaos Space Marines that I bought before bit services went off. The Berzerker Assault one that I want to go for, like this, I'm just listing this so we can sort of inform decisions. They get +2 when they run. Um, they get a bonus 2-inch for charge moves, and with the game being faster and all this sort of stuff, lots of infantry is going to work for me. They get a bonus of +1 to their leadership when making pinning tests. Still works.
yep, still
Rampager,
good.
the thing, this is where I get a little, I don't know about that. Rampager squads can be taken as troop choices in a detachment using this Rite of War. It's kind of a weird thing that when I start making lists, I mean, 3,000 is kind of like 2,500 to 3,000 is sort of like the event size, correct?
For sort of standard heresy, yeah.
Yeah. So in that type of a thing, if I'm going with like a Berserker horde, I like big giant units of, a couple big units of despoilers, assault squads. I don't mind taking a 15-man assault squad is not something that I'm going to shy away from at all with characters attached and things like that. I mean, am I right? I mean, it's always going to change based on on what other stuff you're putting around it. But I mean, if I'm looking at trying to spend even a 3,000 point game, if I'm looking to spend like 1,200 points at least in just line troops, am I going in the wrong direction or am I overdoing it there?
So I don't think you are, because that's still only like half your army.
Yeah.
Um, and I think so. I think the benefit to Rampagers being troops is less. It's sort of less impactful for you because you've got a lot of troops choices.
Hmm.
It's nice that it keeps them out of more valuable slots. Um,
Okay.
I don't remember what Rampagers are.
Well, they're elites.
Okay, the
So I mean,
elite.
with the standard thing, you're getting 4 slots, correct?
Yeah.
And you can
Uh,
take like 8 apothecaries in one or some ridiculous amount that I'll never take. So
yeah,
that
elite slots are somewhat precious though.
okay.
Because that's where Terminators live. That's where Contemptors live.
Hmm.
And that's where uh apothecaries live. And yeah, you can bring a lot of apothecaries in a single detachment, but I think it's like
Hmm.
3. So yeah, the standard elites are veterans, cataphracti, Tartarus, Terminators, destroyers, apothecaries, which oh yeah, no, you can take up to 8 apothecaries in a detachment.
Yeah, no, it's batshit.
Tech Marines, Contemptors,
Hmm.
Rapiers. So like that's a pretty crowded slot.
Hmm.
And it also tends to be where your other cool units are. So it's
Yeah.
nice. It actually I wouldn't read it as oh you get to take them as troops to fill mandatory troop slots or things like that, as
Yeah.
much as it is oh thank God they're not an elite.
Okay.
Because the standard 4 sword chart, yeah, you do get 4 elites, but in my experience,
Yeah.
those can get filled up pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because aside from Terminators in the apothecary, and I'm saying aside from these things, and as I'm saying it, I'm like, yeah, and you're at 4 now. Um,
Yeah,
because
that's
also too,
that's the
like,
bit. Is you're like, oh, I'm only going to take, and then you're like, ooh,
well,
I need to drop one of those.
so this is the other weird one with the detachment. So they don't gain line though. So like
Mm-hmm.
the Crimson Path, which is I've heard people math it out and explain why it's the better one, and I'm like, I'm here to scream across the field with a bunch of dudes with chain axes, disordered charges all over the place because that's a charge is a charge. They don't ask how, they just ask
Yep.
how many. Um, this is they get to take rampages as line choices, but I'm like, I'm not worried about not having enough line units, if that
No,
makes
what you've
sense, and I don't
described
want to
has
take them
plenty
everywhere.
of line.
Yeah, I think my old lists would have fit very well into this new game as far as like unit choices and things like that. Like my line game was strong before there were lines. So this is the weird one. Legion Predator squadrons may be taken as fast attack choices in a detachment using this rite of war. What?
Sweet.
What? Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out like what is the logjam at heavy that I'm missing if I'm running like an infantry horde screaming across the
Yeah.
thing.
Um.
Is there actually a logjam or is it just like here's a weird thing, you should take predators because it's
So
thematic?
I
I
think
don't know.
for your design,
Hmm.
there's not really a logjam.
Okay.
With one exception.
Hmm.
Because like if you go through heavy support, like Leviathans, always cool, but you're not going to take a ton of them, and you can take 2 in a single. You can take 3 in a
Yeah.
single slot. Dorados, you're not taking.
Yeah.
Heavy support squads, you've got the one with flamers. Predators are in heavy. Sicarans are in heavy. Arcuses are in heavy. So I think the thing is tanks eat up heavy
Yeah.
support slots real
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
The one thing, Kratos, if you want to take one of those, you're
Hmm.
going to need to. I think the thing that can potentially eat this up for you is, like if you want to take a Spartan for something,
Yeah.
every Spartan is
Yeah.
a heavy support choice.
Right. Right.
Um,
I could see that.
every Land Raider is a heavy support choice. Although you can take 3 in one detachment. So
Mhm.
it'll be a little bit tighter than I think you think it will be once you get to
Mhm.
3,000 points and you start asking,
Yeah.
how do my screaming infantrymen get across the field?
Right. Right.
Because you're like, because some of these guys you're going to want to put in buses that are more secure than a Rhino. Um, and so I think
Well, yeah.
I think it's a good excuse to, because there's only 3 heavy support choices. So you took 2 Vindicators, a Spartan, and some Land Raiders, and you're
Mhm.
out.
True. True.
And I think the appeal for, I mean, I think it could be really fun if you had a Predator squadron, because Predators are fast.
Yeah.
And you can load them up with some wacky weapons.
Yep.
Like, I personally, as an Imperial Fist player, love the Predator cannon as its primary weapon, but like, you can have these things covered in Volkite
Right.
and just
Right.
like go running forward, shooting Martian death rays at people.
Yeah.
You can put up some really nasty flamers if you wanted to do that, or you can, have them like. I think one of the things is you can sort of use predators as a little bit assault tanks,
Mhm.
to go along with your screaming maniacs and somewhat hide the screaming maniacs behind the tanks.
Right.
So I
Right.
think I think both for the rampagers and the predators, it's a nice thing, but
Yeah.
it's not like, oh my god, this is game changing.
Yeah. 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 I guess I'd have to start getting into finalizing the list really to start seeing the squeeze on some of those things.
Yeah, where you're like, oh
Um,
man, I do really need another heavy support choice to make this work.
so
It's like, oh, good
just
news, Predator Squadron.
yeah, as an indicator of what my playstyle was like in 1.0, the plastic Spartan that came with this is the third one that I own, and I have 0 painted. I've never played a game with a Spartan. So which is a thing that needs to change. I mean,
Which is
because
a thing that
obviously
needs to change.
I
Um,
need to change it.
we have
Especially
video off, but I'm judging you silently. Um,
and out loud.
and out loud.
Yeah, I guess I think it's that before Spartans used to be a little harder to come by,
Yeah.
it being resin and everything. So, and with the flare shield and all that sort of stuff, they could. It just felt a little. I hate to use basic, but it did. It felt a little basic to just be like, yeah, I've got my giant unit of Terminators, my Primarch, and it's in a Spartan, and I'm going to roll it up the gut. And
I mean,
this is
that was
coming from a
always
guy.
like the shorthand for it was the Primarch Boyfriend Squad, which was like
Yeah,
your Primarch, whatever special Terminators you have, stick them in a Spartan, front towards enemy,
right.
away you go.
As to where, I mean, it sounds dumb, but I kind of had like a satisfaction in being the guy that people would looking like, oh, you don't have any Spartans? All right. And then like they would just see the wall of infantry and they're like, you're just going to run across the field. And then you hit the line and you just, internally you're screaming our turn. And
Mm-hmm.
it turns into the giant mosh pit that you want it to be. You want the game to be as a world eater player. But yeah, you're right. I need to paint a Spartan. Well,
I mean, I
March
need to
is
paint a
going to
Spartan,
be,
so
I,
mechanized
I,
march.
yeah, mechanized march is going to be a thing. And I think, I wonder if I just assemble this plastic one and just paint that and make the other two that I've owned for years wait. I should do that. That would be hilarious. Because then when I get done, that like there's nothing like getting one done and just being like, why not 3?
Porque no
Well,
los tres.
yeah, one of them was supposed to be for my 40k world eaters, but now all that stuff's legends, and I'll paint the one for the
And
40k
there you
world
go.
eaters.
If you do that, all your heavy support choices are full.
Oh, see, I could do that. Then I'd be like, see, now I can use predators in
Yeah.
those slots. Now the one unit, and I'm telling you, I used them before, and it was fine. And I've read nothing but they're terrible. Don't do it. I love destroyers. I used to use destroyers regularly, and rad grenades and chain axes just ain't nothing to fuck with. Um, are they still a hard mode unit like they were before, in your experience in this edition?
So I think they have gone from a hard mode unit to a understandable affectation unit. And I say this as someone who has them,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
plays with them. Like,
yeah.
are they amazing? No.
No.
Is it terribly satisfying when a unit of scouts has been sniping your units all game to hit that squad with a rad missile? Yes.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite as satisfying. Um, I think having, because there's actually two now. There's both the with and without um
Mhm.
jump packs.
Yeah.
They're fine. They're not
Mm.
amazing, but they're fine. Um, that being said, I haven't kept track. Games Workshop went on a kick where every legion gets its own special destroyer squad,
Oh, yeah.
um, except the Imperial Fists, um, which I mean completely tracks. Uh I don't know for them, but like destroyers are, I see them rarely. I have never gone, man, I'm so glad I brought destroyers.
Mm.
But stubborn counterattack with rad grenades and chain swords and bolt pistols is not a bad squad.
Right.
Um, I think one of the places they struggle is the character you can put with them is a Moritat,
Yeah, I'm not
and
into
the
that.
Moritat wants to shoot,
Right.
and the destroyers don't really.
Yeah.
Like they want to shoot for a turn and then either charge or get charged. Turns out it doesn't matter to them.
Right.
So like I don't think there's any harm in bringing them.
Mhm.
Um, I love rad grenades and rad missiles
Yeah.
because because the discussion of things changes entirely when suddenly your opponent is toughness 3.
Yeah.
Like I saw actually a couple days ago, we have a local Imperial Fist player and a local Death Guard player, and the Imperial Fists had the classic Terminators with storm shields and Solarite power gauntlets.
Mhm.
Uh, they got hit by a rad grenade, and then a big unit like a 15-man unit of tactical marines with chainswords charged them,
Yeah.
and uh, wounding on threes re-rolling, you're going to
Yeah.
fail some 2-up saves.
Well, but I mean, like, if you hit something with a rad missile and then you have a big unit charging them with chain axes,
Yeah,
I mean, they're wounding on twos then, correct? Because
yeah.
it's a 5-3 situation.
So
So,
you have to double to wound them on twos.
oh, I thought it was
I
just two more
think.
did it. Wasn't
I
it
can't remember.
6? Yeah, I thought 6
I
wounded
play so
fours
I
on a
play so
2.
many games. Um,
Well, so you were mentioning that everybody gets their own one, and I might have printed some stuff specifically to make. The World Eaters one is the Red Hand Destroyer Assault unit, so they're only 10 points more than a normal one. What's interesting they have the normal stuff, right? So they have the stubborn counterattack.
for the record, you are
Um,
right.
okay, yeah, that's what I was going to say. So like with World Eaters, I mean they even if they
Yeah,
shoot something and they don't get to charge it, like even if they're fighting against a unit, the rad grenades lower their toughness by 1. That's
yeah,
yeah,
that's nasty.
twos with rerolls. It's nuts.
Yeah,
So their unit, like all their stuff looks the same. Some of the options are a little bit different. They can sprinkle in. They're 10 points more than a normal destroyer squad, which I know already I'm getting a little pullback from people because they're not cheap. But you can give them. They can exchange. What there's a weird thing where they're right of the world eaters just legion rule. They can exchange chain swords for chain axes. This unit, I don't know why they had to give them chain axes or chain swords rather, so that you can exchange it. I wish they would have just made them chain axes, but I guess they want to give you the option if you want to just model
because you
something or
because you
not.
bought the models with
Yeah,
chain swords and
yeah, and you don't want to drop what is it? What's the going rate on 5 Phobos chain axes right now? Like $32 or some crazy.
it's a lot of money. It's a lot of
Yeah,
money
like
for not very much resin.
It's not. It's really not. And then when you break down the cost, it's like, okay, I'm going to buy a 20-man despoiler squad and give them chain axes. It's $200 for 20 guys. I'm talking $10 a plastic model with a derpy little. Anyways, ain't nobody got time for that. Well, these guys though, you can add the weird gladiator weapons to them. So you can add like a phalanx blades to just a guy, not even like the. Yeah, it's real weird. You can add a thunder hammer instead of the missile launcher if you want to. There's some real weird options in here. But the thing that they have, so this is where I mean, they're always going to be a suicide unit. I mean, you don't join the destroyer corps to like have a long career.
Yeah.
They have to declare a charge if they're within 12 inches of a unit. So they're going to get pulled off of things. They're going to get baited into stuff. They're constantly going to charge. They also get a bonus of +1 to the amount of wounds that they inflicted for determining combat resolution, which with a small unit is kind of helpful, with their kind of disproportionate output too. And they get a bonus of +1 to any sweeping advance roll they make if they're on the winning side. So weirdly enough, Bitter Duty, the other character that can be attached to them is Garland Surlac, who also has the Bitter Duty rule.
It's not the worst thing I've ever heard.
It's not the worst thing I've ever heard, but I also have never fielded that guy, and I never will, and I'm going to keep holding strong on that one. But it's just a weird aside with it. But this is one of those units that, again, it's the modeler in me. I kind of feel like I need to go for it with these guys. And if you're talking a 3,000 point game, I don't mind pissing 225 points down a unit that looks cool. And when it does stuff, makes me smile, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think for that, so you're basically looking at them as a powered up assault squad.
Yeah.
And like they are a powered up assault squad. That's not a bad unit. It's a little bit spendy, but it's not a huge amount of your stuff. It looks cool. Worst case, they're a distraction Carnifex because they look cool, and so people assume that means they're dangerous.
Yeah.
Best case, they do stuff and it makes you giggle.
Right.
I will say, while we were talking about the 2,500 to 3,000 point version of this army, the Zone Mortalis version of this army is terrifying.
Please tell me more.
You move fast.
I just got the Zone Mortalis rules 2 days ago in the mail, so I haven't gone through it totally. But like that's my first list is going to be painting towards that because it's it's all the infantry stuff, it's all the new stuff, so that works fine.
Like you move fast, you hit hard.
Yes.
The primary weakness to hordes of dudes charging across the table is the dudes at the other end of the table with heavy weapons. The dudes with heavy weapons can't see you for most of it.
True.
Overwatch is much less of a thing in Zone Mortalis because it's not an available reaction.
Right.
Like it's nasty.
Like
it has one of those all of our strengths, none of our weaknesses thing. Because like how I would deal with this army is just send ordnance down range until they die.
Yeah.
And like, no, don't move forward. And then send Imperial Fist Terminators after you. But like for this in Zone Mortalis, I think it's a very strong Zone Mortalis force. And I think you have a good core there that then you can flesh out and build and stick folks and Spartans and whatnot. But yeah, I think you have enough stuff that nothing you've described is like, Brian, what are you thinking?
Okay.
Like it's incredibly characterful. I think anyone who plays it will be like, hell yeah, World Eaters. Is it gonna, go 5-0 at some big event? Probably not.
Fuck no.
Also, who cares? It's Heresy.
Right.
I would stay out of, what is it? Nova has, I think it's their Excruciatus that is the like, so you're bringing you're bringing the stuff that's broken and you know it's broken.
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
I don't know that you'll have fun at that. But
No.
past that, like if you're playing people who, oh yeah, that feels like an Iron Hands army, or that feels like an
Right.
Imperial Fist army, I think this will be a blast to play.
Yeah.
And I
And that
think it will, and I think it doesn't have a lot of cognitive overhead,
no,
which is
no.
also a nice thing for big games. Is like, yeah,
Yes.
my dudes go forward
Yep.
and they go forward fast.
Yeah, I think the only things that I because with something that's just the entire direction is a mob going in one going forward, it always needs those sort of you need those little like weird flanking and deep striking things. You
Yeah,
know, so like the Nuncio Vox, is that right? The thing that lets you reroll scatters if they can see it.
yeah,
With having a ton of just core line guys, like I should be able to see most of the board. So
yeah.
having a couple of, and then with these guys dropping in, um, with getting the God, what was it for 12 inches plus 3 to the
Plus
charge,
3 to the charge. Yeah,
and then plus 2 for just batshit crazy world eater nonsense. Like you're gonna make those, and so I feel like I do need to still include like God, I would love some javelins, but I can't I can't buy that in resin and feel good. Like my
yeah.
kids are I know I had to edit out a lot of my kids like really not behaving, but
But you do love them.
I do love them, so that's why I'm not going to buy javelins. But but I'm thinking that the God going to toughness 4 though, like the dick bikes with multi meltas and things like that really, I think I can still pull it and make it work. And they're not
Yeah.
terrible if they charge like a small unit or something like that, just to kind of tie them up for a little bit. So yeah. So I guess
I can't remember what rulebook it's in. I think it might be in Legends or the PDF supplement.
okay.
But another interesting one there is the Warmonger console
Okay.
that lets you take the somewhat more dangerous deep strike with a unit.
Mm. Okay.
I had someone come at me with a Sons of Horus Warmonger with 15 Reavers.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't really have a plan for dealing with that.
Wow.
Thankfully, they whiffed a very important roll and ran away. Um,
Wow.
but like that's another potential source of deep strike for you.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that again is fun and characterful because that's just some like we opened up the warp and screaming nonsense came out.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, it's
yeah,
interesting.
I
It does it allow you to take like, I mean, well, I guess there wouldn't be a restriction as far as what you're taking. It just has to be like an infantry unit, right? So you could take like
um,
despoilers. I mean, it would
I'm
have like a large
sure.
foot. It would have a large footprint, making that YOLO charge or that YOLO deep strike even.
Yeah,
It'll put the.
it's not safe.
It's not
Um,
safe.
it's not safe, but really, were you really here to be
No,
safe?
I was not here to be safe.
Let's see if it's in. Yeah, it's in the Legacies of the Dark Age or whatever the PDF is. So the
Okay.
Warmonger console is a Centurion or the Centurion in either type of Terminator armor. They get a etheric junction splicer. They can't take a combat bike, a jet bike, or a jump pack, so it would have to be a dude rule. And
Yeah.
the game was called Tip of the Spear. So the etheric junction splicer, a model with this or any units they join, including during or prior to deployment, gains a deep strike special rule and must be assigned to deep strike assault. Additionally, any unit that includes a model with this that enters play during deep strike must roll a dice for each model after it has been completely deployed and any pinning tests or reactions have done. Any dice of a 1, a single wound, which only invulnerable saves can be taken, is inflicted on the
Wow.
unit. So basically, yeah, like some of you got either eaten by demons or minor deep strike malfunctions.
Right. Right.
Um, the tip of the spear rule is they have to be in deep strike assault. Um, Additionally, a unit that includes one or more models with a special rule must always have a charge declared for it during the controlling player's assault phase if they're valid charge units. If there's more than one valid unit, you decide. So like some of your ones where like they have to do that anyway,
Right.
that's not really a downside
There is no downside. Yeah.
because you were already going to do that, and now you're just doing it at a deep strike.
And if you're doing it with
Um,
despoilers, I mean, they're cheap as fuck anyways.
so the spoilers you wouldn't be able to join because he doesn't have bitter duty.
Oh, it has bitter duty. Okay.
It doesn't have bitter duty,
Got
but the
it. Okay.
spoilers do.
Well, and the World Eaters.
Oh, sorry, not to spoilers. Sorry, all the various made up names make sense. Yeah, so the spoilers you could just pack this guy in with the spoilers. I was thinking destroyers.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you can't take them with destroyers. The
Yeah.
spoilers would work.
Although it'd be
Terminators.
hilarious, the World Eaters despoiler unit can take up to 15 guys in a unit.
Yeah, that'd be
Not
wacky.
that you could, but it would be hilarious.
Yeah. But you could take like honestly like this guy in apothecary and some despoilers,
Yeah.
and that's not an inconsequential unit.
What would be interesting is taking that and taking them with the World Eaters Inducti unit, because they have to charge things that are within 12 inches, like you were saying.
Yeah, so like you could put them with an inductee. First of all, you don't
Yeah.
care if some of them get blown up as the teleporter fails because they're inductee.
Yeah, they just got out of the bat. Yeah, they're rolling around with stolen valor, valor memories in their heads anyway. So fuck them.
Exactly, and then the tip of the spear roll doesn't matter because you were going to have to do that anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. I like it. Man, it's funny because like painting towards the Zone Mortalis thing, I know that we talked about before back in the day. I mean, I still want to make that the Armistos console with the heavy flamer to run around with some breachers and everything like that. Like I want to print up some shields to use on the new like Mark III plastics for all that sort of a thing, but I'm just not sure that breachers are going to have a place. Breachers, I feel like would not fit in with this army with the whole horde thing because they're heavy, so they can't run. They're just
not unless they're in a Land Raider or a Spartan.
Yeah, that would be a hard sell. But damn it, I want to paint them. Well, so I guess long story short, I guess I'm just going to start out plowing through all these infantry. I have to paint a Spartan next month because I just said it, and it's going to be mechanized marched. And I guess destroyers are still what they were, which means I got to just do it because
yeah, I don't think they're bad.
there.
Like I have them in my list, and I'm never oh, I'm so glad I brought these, but I'm also never like this was a complete waste of points.
Yeah, I got to do it, and I might as well, if I'm doing it, try to do the special World Eater one too, just because they look cool as shit.
Yeah, and why not?
I mean, red hand destroyers, like they have red hands. You got to do it.
Dope.
So, all right. Well, it sounds like I'm not doing anything stupid so far, and it sounds like I really should just follow my bliss and roll with this.
Yeah, I think my take on this list is I would happily play against you, and I would be worried.
Right.
Like I'm on neither end of the spectrum. That's like, oh, maybe I could not get a game with Brian because this isn't going to be fun. Right. But also not like, all right, easy win. Let's do this.
And that's the thing is that most of my playing on this is going to be going to events.
Yeah.
Which that's what Heresy always looked like before. I played very few casual, like one-on-one, like it was always with, ranged with a friend. If I did, most of my stuff came at events, and I want my opponent's reaction when they see my list and see what I'm doing to go, that looks like a World Eater's army. Like that's what it should look like. Not like that is the clever combination of edge cases that make for an efficient army. Like I want people when I'm playing to have that sensation of, holy shit, that's a lot of guys screaming at me and they're going to hit. It's just a matter of figuring out who's going to sell their lives to stall them for a little bit or whatever. Like I want that experience to be what it should be.
Yeah. And I think that's the real takeaway for this is the vibes for this army are excellent and exactly what they should be. And I think in exchange for that, it's also not so weird on the tabletop that
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Brian, yeah, the vibes are right, but it would occasionally be nice to win a game, right? I think in this case, I think you're going to get both of those.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like that. Okay. I'm doing the right things, and I'm okay
Yeah,
with that. As I'm looking at this assault squad that I just got, that I just have to finish building and doing the thing for, and yeah, after I paint these
yeah,
heavy flamer guys, and yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that I love here. Um, so let's switch instead of going to a new segment. Let's wrap up. Let's wrap up
yeah.
the.
We promised this segment would be short, and we lied.
Hey, the other ones were an hour each. This one was only 43, so this is technically another segment. We're fine. Um, when I went to when we first discussed doing this episode last month, I put a little thing in our Discord group, which by the way, our Discord group, aside from that one incident, has been fucking awesome. I love the guys there. It's a good supportive group. If you want to join, contact us. You can email us at lost to the nails at gmail.com. We'll send you an invite. I'm not going to do the open invite thing because I don't want like casual homophobic memes to just pop up. That's not what we're doing in 2024. I put out there, I was like, hey, we're putting a thing out. What kind of questions would you guys want covered for a person going into 2.0 like me, a guy who hasn't played in a long time and just getting into it? Let's see. Um, Mike, the guy that put the thing together, Frugal Mike Farias, he put, I always love rundowns and finding what Eric and yourself think the strengths and weaknesses of the new system is. Also a focus of hobby, how different legions would be better reflected in late heresy. I think we kind of talked about that with World Eaters a little bit. You know, like mine, I'm going for a lot of new recruits, and the just tactics are kind of out the window. So I'm trying to go for like my characters. I want to be people that are pretty well down the path. You know, I
Yeah,
like the idea of the company that I'm playing being, yeah, these guys are fucking lunatics, and because they're lunatics, there's a high attrition rate. It's backfilled with we're filling it in with new recruits, and they're just going to keep running into the guns until they die. So that's I to me that's how World Eaters should look late heresy. He said some legions I guess are obvious, but would Alpha Legion look much different? What do you think on that one?
so I think that's a really good question. So I'll answer Alpha Legion first, and then I'll answer for the Imperial Fists.
Sure.
For Alpha Legion, I think you could have a very different feeling for Alpha Legion in the late heresy, in a couple different ways. First of all, um, immediately prior to the Siege books, the Alpha Legion attacked Pluto. And so I think there's
Mm-hmm.
a great excuse to do an Alpha Legion boarding army.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's for that void war over Pluto,
Mm-hmm.
where Alfarius gets murked by Rogel Dorn. Um,
Yeah.
I think you can do that. I think one of the interesting things for the Alpha Legion in sort of the siege is they're not all that present. So you can
Yeah.
sort of have them show up in weird ways.
Yeah.
Where like, because if you think about like the scope of the siege, not all that present, a 3,000 point Alpha Legion army wouldn't register as
Yeah.
like a thing in the
Yeah.
scope of the. So you can have them doing whatever that little put your thumb on the scales type Alpha Legion thing is. So I think you have to actually have a lot of flexibility there. But yeah, my first instinct is there's a great excuse for a boarding wars
Yeah.
force
Yeah.
for sort of late heresy.
Totally.
Um, when I think about how I do this for the Imperial Fists, there's a couple things. I avoided using named characters for the
Mm-hmm.
Imperial Fists for my stuff that isn't um, Siege of Terra era, because
Yeah.
like Sigismund got recalled and didn't
Yeah.
leave. So like post Istvan, a bunch of named characters, Rogel Dorn, Sigismund, they're not present.
Yeah.
In the Siege, they are. So like, yeah, break out the Fafnir Ron Sigismund buddy cop combo. Um, the other thing I've been doing is sort of echoing what Brian was talking about. My assault squad is Mark V Bear Ceramite, the Imperial Fist logo on a single shoulder pad.
Yeah.
Similar, like, congratulations, kid, you passed your test. Um, get to the wall.
Yeah.
So some stuff like that, and also breaking out some units that sort of conventionally I would be hesitant to use in an Imperial Fist army. Destroyer squads.
Yeah.
I'm working on a librarian. Because after the phalanx gets boarded by demons,
Right.
Rogaldorn pulls the breaking case of emergency librarian button.
Right.
I
Right.
have a opponent's permission scheme to do a demon summoning loyalist Imperial Fist librarian.
Holy
Who,
shit.
if you've read the Wheel of Time series, the horn that summons the heroes of old,
Hmm.
I have a plan to do a squad of like 2 like Arthurian knights, 2 like U.S. Marines, some guys from the 30s, just basically like dip into my historicals bits pile. And this guy is summoning the heroes of Terra of old without really asking many questions about that.
Sure.
Um, and so but my conventional plan for him is to just use him as a librarian,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
late in the heresy they start showing up. So those
Right.
things that like Rogaldorn would have been squeamish about when
Right.
things were going well, and the answer is now like, nope, nope, bring him
Yeah.
out. Like,
Yeah.
we need to get this done. There's a great scene. It's one of the best parts of Mortis where like Rogaldorn is really upset about just unleashing Ordo Sinister, and then is like, yeah, but it's got to be done. Um,
Right.
and so we are, for late heresy, we are in that no take backs space.
Right.
And so for me,
Right.
for theming a legion around that, for any of the loyalist legions,
Yeah.
breaking out the stuff that you'd be a little bit hesitant to do back when we were the good guys, and it's just like, nope, like,
Right.
now everything's gone wrong. Let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I was like, what do you do for late Emperor's Children? And then I was like, let's keep it a family show.
Not safe for work.
Um, not safe for work. Next one. Oh, this is gonna be real short, unfortunately. This is from another Mike Farias. Um, do you anticipate there being a home for Xenos players or even for Sisters players in this edition? I'm gonna start with a hearty fuck no.
For
What do you
Xenos
think, Derek?
players, no.
Yeah.
Um, there was a brief attempt to do, I want to say, Orcs, Eldar, and Necrons in Heresy 1.
Yeah. That
That
was
was like a
the
fan based thing.
Mournival events, the
Yeah.
guys in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
neat, but I don't think it really captured anyone's attention enough to be super
Yeah.
sustainable. Sisters, my heart says yes, my brain says no.
Yeah.
Um, I want it to be true. I think it hurt them a lot that they got split from the Custodes.
Hmm.
Because now you can't have a heavily Sisters flavored Talons army that
Yeah.
uses the fact that the Custodes are, or Custodes are well supported,
Yeah.
to sort of flesh that out. I
Yeah.
think the unit choices they've given the Sisters are really super cool and really interesting. They don't have any models for it, and we haven't heard anything that suggests they'll get models for it. And
Yeah.
importantly, they are hard countered by Contemptor Dreadnoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have no answer to that beyond an allied detachment.
Well,
And Contemptor Dreadnoughts are one of the most ubiquitous units in the game. That's like saying you're hard countered by tactical Marines.
right. And the thing that I would point out too with Sisters is that they already put a ton of time into a new plastic line. The 40K Sisters line is awesome. I think if they're going to start doing stuff in plastics, I mean, if you look at like, they've been slowly like going through and like replacing resin units with plastic units, right? That it just takes a lot of time and bandwidth, and they're going to get more bang out of their buck doing that. I mean, them doing the Solar Exilia in plastic is awesome because you need variety, right? You need something. You need something that looks like the Imperial Army. I just think resource wise, Sisters would take a huge backseat to if they start making Mechanicum in plastic. There are a lot of people that are going to jump on that. Like a dark Mechanicum list would be real. And I'm not a Mechanicum guy. Um, a dark, that would be real hard for me to say no to. If they had them in plastic, it would start out
Yeah.
with the lie of, oh, this is an allied detachment, and it would turn into a full army real quick because cyborg t-shirt wearing mechanical weirdos would spark a lot of joy
Yeah.
for a
I
lot. But
think
I mean, yeah.
there's a book I just finished on war game design by Rick Priestley, who
Hmm.
he said the good rule of thumb for popularity is the second most popular army is half as popular as the first, the third is half as popular as the second, etc., etc.
Mm,
I
yeah.
don't think there's a good return for
No.
you, especially special sisters units.
Yeah.
I will say though that they do, I think, make a good detachment for allied detachments.
Hmm.
Because they have some neat little tricks.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
whole like you can set a unit's weapon skill to 1 for a turn is just neat.
Yeah.
So I think there's some ways to work them into armies, but I think it is sadly at this point something where the answer is they're best treated as an auxiliary detachment to
Yeah.
another army, and that
Yeah.
if you do consider yourself a Sisters of Silence player, you are in for a long and conversion heavy road, and
Yeah.
should occasionally expect to go 0-5 if you go to an
Yeah.
event somewhere.
Yeah.
And I hate
Um,
I hate that, but
yeah, it is what it is. Um, this is another one from another Mike Farias. What are 3 to 4 relatively evergreen units available in plastic to add to the Age of Darkness box that would round out a take all comers type of list? I don't have as much experience. I'm going to throw some things out here, Eric, and you tell me if I'm landing correctly. I feel like to me, it's tanks and transports, right? I
yep.
mean, you have basic infantry, you have Terminators, you have a Spartan in the thing. I feel like you would need something mobile with some firepower to it. So, like a Sakaran, I think would be great. Um, Basic rhinos aren't going to be terrible. You can do things with those. Um, and it depends on the Legion too, because I mean, if you're talking World Eaters, you're like 100% an assault squad.
Just
But
yeah.
yeah, there's just I think it depends on the build that you want to go. But like, I don't think you can go wrong going with like a Sakaran or a Predator or some sort of a tank that shoots. You have a
Yeah.
Dreadnought, you have a Contemptor, you have a ton of infantry and Terminators. You have something to get the Terminators there. So yeah, I would think vehicles would be the quickest way too, because you're going to get a little more bang for your buck as far as a single model that really ups your points thing versus 10-point guys with bolters. So
Yeah, I think in terms of evergreen units, that's right where my mind went to is
yeah,
rhinos, Sakarans. The Predator's really good. I like Predators. Those are all plastics now, which makes them much more accessible. But yeah, like there was a reason, sort of as Brian was talking about how the Spartan was a pretty ubiquitous tank in Heresy One.
yeah,
There's also a reason the Sakaran was.
yeah,
They're good.
yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'd go to is adding vehicles to flesh those out, and then like more Terminators, more tactical Marines. Like
Yeah,
those are also evergreen units because, as we mentioned, line is great.
right.
But yeah, that's where I'd go is Rhinos, Sakarans, Predators, and Land Raiders.
Yep. Oh, this is a rough one. And man, I think our answer will be short on this one. Alamo Melt wrote is there any reasonable way for the same army to play Horus Heresy and 40K? Horus Heresy is the hot stuff locally right now. I have 0 Space Marines. And when everybody wanders away in 6 months, I don't want a useless pile of plastic that I've just finished painting. Um, I replied to him and I was like, pretty legit. It was surprising to me. I have no idea what the current 40K Space Marine Codex looks like. It came out when I was in the middle of, surgery and, father-in-law dying and a bunch of stuff like that. This is the first time in like 30 years that I have no idea what the current Space Marine list looks like. And that is an okay place to be. It's a shitty way to answer this question, but I'm assuming that it's going to be real hard to pull that off because there's not a lot of overlap. A lot of the stuff that you want to use in Heresy is not going to unless you can play Legends in 40K, is just, like you aren't going to be able to use your Sakarans, you aren't going to be able to use the Spartan and things like that. Like I don't think it would translate very well.
Yeah. I think doing that would end with you having both a very contrived heresy list and a very contrived 40K list.
Yeah.
So like there are units that sort of shine between the two. The ones I'm thinking about right now are Land Raiders and Terminators. But I think honestly the answer is no. I think
Yeah.
Games Workshop sort of deliberately with how they did Legends
Hmm.
wanted to make those model lines distinct, partially so they don't have to deal with balancing heresy units that show up in 40K.
Yeah.
And then also, I think they just want them to be distinct lines. I tried at one point to sort of like, oh, what would my Imperial Fist look like if I did them as a 40K army? And it was a
Hmm.
bananas 40K army, and it was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think without a lot of very careful design that will get you two bad armies instead of one enjoyable army,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
an awful lot of these guys count as something entirely different.
Yeah.
Um, I honestly, I think the answer is no. And again, I hate that, but I think
Yeah.
the answer is no.
True.
The
True.
the age of the Primaris is upon us, and that has involved a complete redesign of what it means to have a Space Marine army.
Yeah. And yeah, true. True. Well, that's it on the listener questions. Man, I got to say, I really appreciate you. Well, I mean, first of all, I just love hanging out and bullshitting with you.
Yeah,
An episode's always just an excuse to do that. The thing that I do appreciate your sort of pointing out certain things in there. Like it sounds like I'm on the right track, which is good.
yeah,
And again, like this is where my hobby heart is right now, and it lets me play around with the printer and do stuff like that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And I'm hoping if we well, I mean, we got to get you down here at some point.
yeah.
um
I'll come up with a
I
way
don't know
to
if
get
it'll
down
be
there
for
at some
this,
point.
or yeah, I don't know if it'll be for this, or I don't know if it'll be for Titanicus, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all the same setting, and it's all good. The people here that play all these are great people, so you'll have fun no matter what. Um, Real question. This is just the standing thing when I copy and paste the format for notes. It says next time, and the bullet note never changes. It's always who the fuck knows. Um, why don't you call it? Well, I guess you can call it and say this is what we're going to do, and we're not doing it. But if you were to pick what we were doing in next episode, what would we do?
Mm,
We can't do the World Eater. Like, okay, so the World Eaters, the 9 episode that we were talking about, I want to hold off on that until I get a few games of Heresy in, because I do want to discuss how they play in. I know how they play in 40K. I want to put how they play in 30K and be able to actually speak to that with some sort of coherent anything. So that's the only thing that's off the table. If you're calling what we're doing next month, what would we do?
that's a good question, and one I wasn't expecting. So thanks, Brian.
You're
Um,
welcome.
so one of the goals for the show generally is to have sort of semi evergreen episodes rather than like
Yeah.
we review a codex.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think sort of building off of this episode and one of the previous questions, maybe we talk about army theming. And how
Oh,
each of us approaches theming an army, which sort of gets at
yes.
our that we're both fairly narrative players. We both want the
Yeah.
vibes to be correct. And what does it mean to theme an army, and what are a couple approaches for that?
I I am 100% all over that.
Sweet.
I I love that. I love that because there's a couple of new armies and things I'm looking at doing, and yeah, that makes me do some stuff that I already wanted to do. So,
Awesome.
damn it, Eric, you are a fucking genius. Thank you.
Now,
By the
veteran
way.
listeners will know that that means next month we will be talking about something else entirely.
Oh
But
yeah.
our aspiration is to talk about army theming.
Well, if you're new, you're expecting us to talk about it, and you're also expecting it to come out next month. If you're a veteran listener, you are shocked that this is coming out within half a year of the last
Yeah.
one. So we might be turning over a new leaf in 2024.
Yeah, we've headed from a semi-annual to a quarterly podcast.
Yeah, like it's what? It's been 6 weeks since the last one,
Yeah,
maybe.
we're doing good.
Provided I don't sit on it and not edit
Yeah.
it for a month.
It's been 6
Which,
weeks as of recording.
yes, as a recording from the release of the last one. But Jesus Christ, the last time, it's been too long. Yeah, I got to stop doing
Yeah.
that. So if you would like to get a hold of us, if you'd like to join the Discord group and throw questions at us about theming an army, that could be a new thread I pop up. Contact us at losttothenails@gmail.com. We'll get that in for you. I still don't do shit with social media stuff. Eric, you got stuff. Where do they go?
Yeah, so Brian is the smarter one of us. I am still on the Hateful Bird site at Variance Hammer. I also blog very rarely at variancehammer.com. Most of my ideas are now taken up by this show, which is a good thing. I also have another podcast if you desperately want to hear more about me. That's the Plastic Press Gang podcast, which is a historicals podcast with a member of our club named Calvin, where we try to make historicals gaming a little bit less Rivet County and a little bit more accessible. And yeah, that's the best ways to reach me.
There we go. All right. Well, till next time, I guess.
Let the nails tick.
That didn't fucking work. I don't care. Goodbye.